Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook, Sentinel of American Comics. Chapter 76. In the clean Starlink building, Sean leaned back on the chair, his eyes slightly closed, and his fingers lightly tapping the armrests. He was recalling the battle that had just happened. He seemed to be becoming more and more proficient in energy manipulation. From the first red beam to now condensed into an invisible force field, it is slowly progressing. Perhaps one day, he will be like the powerful character in the comics, possessing the terrifying power to shatter the stars. Erica stood behind the man and gently squeezed his shoulders with both hands. The right amount of force made Sean's tense nerves relax unconsciously. "We can be more thorough," Erica suggested. She leaned down, her soft and delicate body exuding a fragrance. "Kill all the street heroes in Hell's Kitchen. They will only cause more trouble." Listening to the brunette's murderous words, Sean smiled faintly and leaned his head back a little. He had no intention of eradicating all street heroes. Whether it was Daredevil or the Punisher, they were all on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s monitoring list. On the other hand, getting rid of so many key figures at once may have unexpected effects. One Danny Rand is enough to wake them up. Sean opened his eyes with deep eyes and said softly, "And I just took a fancy to his Rand group." He turned on the TV, and the news of the death of young Iron Fist was playing on the screen. "This is CNN, American Cable News Network. Frontline reporter Oriana Faraj is reporting back to you. At 11:32 last night, the new president of the Rand Group, Mr. Danny Rand, while discussing cooperation with real estate tycoon Mr. James Wesley, he slipped and fell from the Star Circle building and died unfortunately. Mr. Rand was a famous entrepreneur in New York. When he was a child, he was unfortunately involved in a plane crash with his parents on a plane. According to the latest report from the New York Police Department, as a result of the investigation, the murderer of Danny Rand was suspected to be Daredevil of Hell's Kitchen, a masked vigilante who violated the law with violent acts." Sean pulled Erica into his arms with his backhand. Feeling the girl's soft and delicate body, he chuckled and said, "See, this is the charm of power." When Kingpin was alive, half of the police officers in the New York Police Department had received money from him, and prosecutors and police chiefs regarded the underworld emperor as a socialite, chatting and laughing with him. Now, Wesley controls more power than he is, a new real estate upstart in New York. He goes to drinking parties with the mayor, threatens juries, bribes the police. He no longer needs to do these low-level tricks. Those who want to get benefits will naturally, you'll know how to do it. "This is why I want to pull you into the darkness, Erica." Sean leaned close to the girl, his warm breath blowing on the earlobes, like a subtle electric current passing through. "Be the one who makes the rules, and you don't have to follow other people's rules. Only in this way can you get rid of all constraints and gain freedom." Erica's heart trembled. She was extremely obsessed with the dark aura in men. Some people liked the warmth brought by light, while others were addicted to the attraction given by darkness. Since being resurrected by Haikong, she has gotten rid of her former self. The emotions and memories in her mind are like another stranger. At first, she could stir up some waves in her heart, but later her heart completely calmed down. Mergers, acquisitions, suppression, with Wesley's ability and means, it is easy to take over the Rand Group. Daredevil can choose to return to normal life, or he can continue to fight against us. Soon you will find that you can't move in Hell's Kitchen. Sean looked at the news report on TV. The Red Devil of Hell's Kitchen was listed by the police as a most wanted criminal, as dangerous as the Punisher. He smiled and said, "The reason why people admire heroes is because they want to be heroes. It requires paying an unimaginable huge price, and wearing a mask means bearing everything. There has never been a savior in this world." Erica slightly broke away from the man's arms. She stared at the young face, her cold eyes filled with astonishing brilliance. She slowly lowered her head and licked her red lips with her tongue. Sean's breathing became slightly heavier, and Erica suddenly revealed a charming aura, which made his ordinary heart feel a little itchy. On the TV, reports about the New York Police Department's wanted Daredevil were still playing, and the man and woman sitting in the chairs were already falling into a tender entanglement. At the same time, in Watsonton's office, Marcus, as the helmsman, slammed the folders on the table at his incompetent subordinates. Hamilton resisted the desire to dodge and endured the boss's thunderous wrath. "Trash. A bunch of trash," the lion-like old man roared angrily. He pointed at the news report on the TV and roared, who told me that Sean Cypers would definitely do it. Sell the formula of the genetic drug to Watson. What is the result? Osborne and Umbrella Laboratories jointly issued a statement that the new drug will be officially launched today and enter the medical market. Marcus recited the news reports with a gloomy face. He looked at the shrinking employee and wanted to throw this stupid guy downstairs. Cunning little guy. While stabilizing Watson, look for foreign aid. The old man who controlled Watson's direction calmed down and couldn't help but sneer. He reprimanded his men mercilessly and said in a stern voice, "Only a fool like you would be deceived by such young people's tricks. If he really wants to sell the formula of genetic medicine, he will secretly find parties to buy it. Instead of delaying time, let new drugs be launched as soon as possible." Hamilton cursed Sean fiercely in his heart. That despicable guy's acting skills were as good as those of a Hollywood star. He actually believed that he was attracted by the conditions offered by Watson and intended to sell the secret formula of genetic medicine and give Osborne a fatal blow. Hit. Well, now that the little guy from Osborne Industries has broken into Watson's territory, I will let him and Sean Cypers know how cruel business competition is. Marcus's eyes flashed with a ferocious light like a lone wolf, and his sinister face was cold, making Hamilton's legs tremble involuntarily. He had followed the master of Watson for nearly 10 years and had not seen him for a long time. This kind of chilly aura that makes one's heart palpitate has appeared on the other party. Like a beast suddenly showing its fangs, there is a sense of terror of being stared at, as if you are not careful, you will be devoured completely. Marcus waved his hand to signal the trembling men to leave. He wanted to free up his hands to deal with Osborne seriously, but his son's condition became more and more serious. The trivial private affairs of the family made him exhausted mentally and physically. Every day he saw his wife's sad face with tears streaming down her face. There was also the pain in his son's eyes. He couldn't help but urge the laboratory to speed up the research progress. Marcus became increasingly upset when he thought of Osborne, a cub, challenging Watson's throne, and as Warren grew older and his physical abnormalities could no longer be concealed. After switching the channel, the news program reported that the famous anti-mutant pioneer, Senator Robert Kelly, was giving an impassioned speech, which emphasized the harm of mutants to society and called on Congress to pass the mutant registration bill as soon as possible. Marcus nodded in agreement. He looked at the senator speaking righteously on the TV, with a dark light flashing in his eyes, as if he had a plan. On a sunny day, the lawn of Umbrella Laboratory was filled with reporters and photographers. A genetic drug that can cure brain degeneration is enough to make the major media like sharks smelling blood. Scrambling to get first-hand access to the latest reports. Sean is wearing a well-fitting and pressed handmade suit, full of vigor and vitality, and his smile is as bright as the sun. This young and promising genius is neither as proud and complacent as Tony Stark, nor does he have the withdrawn personality of other scientists. No matter how he treats people or things, he is very warm and humble, which makes people feel like spring breeze. "Mr. Cypers, why did you name ALZ-112 Métis Potion?" The reporter wearing black-rimmed glasses tried his best to reach out the microphone to Sean, who was surrounded by his peers. This young genius who almost replaced Stark and dominated the headlines of New York newspapers is now a popular star. As Umbrella and Osborne jointly issued a statement yesterday about the launch of new drugs, major TV stations and the news media, all eyes are focused on Sean, expecting him to bring different surprises to people. Métis is the original goddess of wisdom in ancient Greek mythology. Hesiod called her the most intelligent and righteous planner among all gods and humans. Sean paused and raised a gentle smile. "I hope ALZ-112 can bring back the thinking and wisdom that the disease has deprived humans of." "Hello, Mr. Cypers. Why did you think of developing a genetic drug to cure brain degenerative diseases?" A blonde female reporter squeezed into the circle by virtue of her gender advantage, and the tall cameraman raised his hands. The machine and the camera are pointed at the young man with a bright smile. Sean stopped and talked eloquently under the flashlight. "Many people call the brain degenerative disease Alzheimer's disease, also known as senile dementia. They think that only the elderly will suffer from it. This is actually a misunderstanding. Because familial Alzheimer's disease can develop in middle age, and is far more than just Alzheimer's disease. I have read a research report by Johns Hopkins University. Extrapolating from the data, the number of Alzheimer's patients will reach 107 million by 2050. This is not a small number. Brain degenerative diseases have always been it is difficult to cure. Alzheimer's disease takes most patients only 7 years from diagnosis to leaving the world with an empty head. At the same time, it is one of the most expensive diseases in the world. In 2003, the world spent the cost of treating Alzheimer's disease alone amounts to 156 billion United States dollars, which is equivalent to the annual GDP of a small or medium-sized country. Sean faced the camera, his pitiful eyes, and the shocking data coming out of his mouth, which made the enthusiastic reporters fall silent. Dozens of cameras focused on the young man standing in the center. This disease causes your brain to gradually deteriorate, starting with memory loss, poor judgment, difficulty concentrating, and difficulty handling complex problems. Gradually, it robs you of your emotions and creates social difficulties. In the end, you will forget those important parts of your life, forget your friends and family around you, lose your language and vision, and eventually die in a coma. This is my original intention of developing the Métis potion. It can save those who are suffering from illness. I hope that everyone can enjoy family love with their families when they grow old, instead of not being able to recognize the people around them. Lying on the bed blankly, his consciousness returned to darkness. Under Sean's infectious words, the noisy atmosphere gradually became solemn. In the circular corridor on the second floor, Harry and Gwen stood on it and had a panoramic view of everything happening in the main building of the laboratory. "It's really admirable," Gwen said emotionally while holding the document, with tears in her eyes. The daughter of the police chief was obviously moved by Sean's words. She had never thought that the young man with a smile as bright as the sun would have such compassion in his heart. Harry curled his lips. He just thought that if his friend was not a scientist, he could transition to Hollywood and become an actor. With his appearance and superb acting skills, he would definitely be more popular than Leonardo. Ahem, yes, maybe it was because he had experienced the pain of losing a loved one that Sean came up with the idea of developing Métis potion. As a good teammate, Harry naturally provided assists tactfully. "Mr. Cypers." A black reporter stopped Sean, who was about to leave, and stretched out the microphone to the other party. "Some people on the internet said that the Métis potion developed by Osborne and Umbrella actually has extremely powerful effects. There are significant side effects, and even several patients in clinical trials have experienced obvious discomfort in their bodies. What do you think of this?" The black reporter deliberately spoke loudly, and his words seemed to be just an awe-inspiring, but they concealed murderous intent. The corner of his mouth curled up into a proud smile. "I don't know how many people wanted to see this famous genius in New York fall from the clouds and fall into the dirty mud. First of all, Métis Pharma passed the clinical trials of the US FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and before it was launched, Dr. Connors and I, as well as Mr. Harry Osborne of Osborne Industries, agreed. We have decided to provide free treatment to 3,000 patients suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and so far, they have all maintained good physical condition and vital signs." Sean did not panic and answered the black reporter's questions calmly, with a hint of sharpness in his gentle eyes. "Not only that, Umbrella has also decided to provide a certain number of free places every year from now on to those who are poor and needy. Citizens receive treatment in the hope that they can recover and return to a normal life. If patients using Métis medicine experience any discomfort, they can contact Umbrella Laboratories at any time. We will protect the life, safety, and basic rights of every patient." Thunderous applause rang out, and the sound of flashing lights was even more continuous. The cameraman faithfully recorded this scene. The black reporter wanted to say something, but was squeezed out of the crowd by his colleagues who came up. Surrounded by security personnel, Sean rushed out of the heavy siege of reporters. He climbed onto the circular corridor on the second floor and walked to Harry's side. "Find someone to keep an eye on that black reporter." The young man had a gentle smile on his face and a heart-stopping coldness in his voice. "People from Watsonton." Harry gave the bodyguard a few instructions, and then asked, "What should we do?" "Keep the money sealed." Master Osborne put his hands on the railing. He had never participated in a business competition and was far from knowing the darkness and bloodshed contained in it. He simply thought that this was a trivial matter that could be settled with a little money. "Don't do anything. Contact several officials from the tax bureau and check his bank statements. I believe this reporter will not be a good, honest and law-abiding citizen." Sean waved his hand to stop Harry's dangerous behavior. If this black reporter is physically harmed, someone will immediately pour sewage on them. There was a huge crowd downstairs, and reporters were taking photos. From today on, the name Umbrella will spread across North America, and people will know about this emerging scientific research institution. He patted Harry on the shoulder and smiled. There can only be one lion who leads the pack on the grassland. Watsonton will soon become a thing of the past. After getting rid of the enthusiastic reporters, Sean and Harry sat in the rest area on the second floor. Gwen, who was promoted to experimental assistant, thoughtfully brought coffee to the two of them, and then walked away holding the documents. How enviable, Harry whistled and said teasingly. Sean ignored the deliberately mischievous Master Osborne and took a sip of bitter coffee. Umbrella officially took the first step. Next, we will see how this emerging laboratory will gain a foothold in New York and become one of the world's top scientific research institutions. Break up with Mary Jane. Sean leaned on the sofa. The red-haired girl who attracted the fascination of the Green Goblin and Spider-Man finally chose Peter. Perhaps young girls first long for the upper-class society with beautiful clothes and beautiful hair, but when they really step into it, they find that it is not suitable for them. The kind and reliable Peter is undoubtedly the best destination for Mary Jane. I will bless them. Harry waved his hands in a nonchalant manner. The young and wealthy Osborne has appeared in tabloids as frequently as Tony Stark when he is not in New York. He has been involved in nightclub revelries, swimsuit parties, late-night drag racing, a series of negative reports. It appeared in the newspapers like snowflakes, and the outside world spread that the heir to Osborne Industries did not have Stark's genius mind, but he had learned a lot from Stark's extravagant style. The board of directors has a lot of opinions. You are the leader of Osborne. You can't be invisible all the time. Sean sat closer and warned him earnestly. At present, Harry is his best partner, and the development of Umbrella also requires the support of Osborne Industries, so Sean does not want to watch the other party continue to fall. Although Tony is addicted to wine and pleasure, he never delays the time of invention and creation. In fact, if you don't see Stark in the gossip news for a week, it is probably because he stays in the laboratory, working with a bunch of steel machines for company. Haha, they have never been satisfied with me. Harry snorted coldly and said in a dissatisfied tone, "Since my father passed away, these people have tried every means to take away Osborne and drive me out of the board of directors. If it weren't for Murphy with the advent of Sea Potion, maybe the company would have been split up and sold to Wall Street bankers." He looked at Sean and said sincerely, "Speaking of which, I would also like to thank you and Dr. Connors. Without you, I would not have been able to save Osborne." As the person being thanked, Sean shrugged his shoulders and looked through the glass at the hills and dense forests in the distance. He raised the cup and tasted the rich aroma lingering on the tip of his tongue. Life is like this cup of coffee. After the bitterness, the fragrance is rich. The aroma. Defeating one opponent after another and overcoming many obstacles on the way forward, until in the end, he will naturally reach the top of the world's pyramid. You can prove to others that Harry Osborne is not just a playboy who only knows how to have fun, he also has a good side. Sean's eyes showed strong confidence, and he looked deeply at Osborne's face. Just like Dr. Connors and I did, we use results to prove everything. People in the world tend to only pursue successful people. As long as you can achieve extraordinary achievements, they will naturally forget your previous ridiculous behavior, and some people will even think about it. You defend yourself and think this is a beautiful story about the return of a prodigal son. Harry was slightly startled. He himself had some lack of self-confidence and said hesitantly, "I neither understand business operations nor do I have a genius-like mind." Sean smiled calmly and stopped Harry from continuing. It seemed that the Osborne heir really lacked confidence in himself. Maybe it was Norman's indifference, or maybe he had not been recognized by others since he was a child, which made Austria Master Sibbon acquiesce that he was just a mediocre person. You are a general commanding an army, not a soldier charging into battle. You only need to lead the war to victory, defeat the giants of the medical industry and pull Watson off his throne. I guarantee that no one will say that again in the future. Harry Osborne is an ignorant and incompetent guy, they will shamelessly hold you up, completely forgetting the previous slanders and ridicules. Sean's words seemed to instill great confidence in Harry, and his depressed expression was swept away, like an enthusiastic soldier. He picked up the cup on the table and drank the slightly cold coffee. He seemed to remember something inadvertently and asked, I heard from Gwen that you are interested in financial games like stocks. Sean nodded, and he found a few outstanding securities brokers to try to short sell Stark Industries stock, just to earn some pocket money for himself. Oh my God, no one thought that Stark Industries, a military giant, would see its stock price plummet like Osborne did before. Harry couldn't help but be a little anxious. Although he didn't understand securities trading, a behemoth like Stark Industries couldn't be shaken by a little money. Even if it took the entire Osborne, it might not be able to shake this giant company that stood at the top of the industry. How much money did you invest? Master Osborne asked. 80 million. Sean gave the answer. He didn't expect to injure Stark Industries. That was too unrealistic, but it could both defeat his opponents and gain a lot of money, so why not do it? Seeing his friend's resolute attitude and nonchalant look, Harry couldn't help but hesitate and asked in a low voice, what inside information did you get? In his understanding, Sean would never participate in a game that he was not sure of winning. This young man who was regarded as a genius by New York had always only been the winner in the end. You can also invest a little, and maybe I can get you a Lamborghini's latest sports car. Sean smiled slightly and said no more. Harry thought for a while and decided to trust his friend's judgment. After all, Sean had created too many miracles and gave people a strong sense of trust. Hey, he also joined Umbrella? Harry asked curiously as he inadvertently caught a glimpse of a figure out of the corner of his eye. Do you know Dr. Otto? Sean looked at the middle-aged man standing in the corridor, talking happily with Connors. The man was short and fat, with a simple face, and was wearing a brown coat. After many invitations from Dr. Connors, the future Dr. Octopus finally joined Umbrella and led a scientific research team alone to conduct research and development experiments on new energy sources. He had approached Osborne before and said that he had an artificial sun energy project. The scientific research department thought that the investment was too high and the future benefits were not clear enough, so they rejected the funding application. Harry didn't take it seriously. He had seen the experimental report and created a cheap and efficient new energy source. This was not attractive to Osborne Industries, which decided to transform into a cross-border industry. Especially the huge investment would make other investments those who stay away from it. Are you optimistic about the future prospects of energy projects? Master Osborne could not understand his friend's thoughts. He seemed to be a prophet, always able to know the development of things in advance. Sean shook his head. He looked at the warm sunshine in the sky and said softly, I just want to create a sun for myself. In the reception room near Capitol Hill, Marcus Watson is waiting for today's two guests. Even though Osborne's new drug has been successfully launched and has received good market response, this man who stands tall in medical science, the business giants at the top of the industry do not believe that Osborne Jr. and a so-called young genius can shake Watson's throne as king for many years. If he really frees up his hands, there are countless ways to wipe out Osborne, who has a shallow foundation, such as acquisitions, mergers, poaching, and creating a crisis of public opinion. A series of fierce offensives are enough to destroy Osborne, who has not yet established a firm foothold. Spen and Umbrella were overwhelmed, but family affairs prevented Marcus from taking more energy, and the most important thing to him at the moment was how to solve the mutant problem. The laboratory's research progress is almost at a standstill. According to the scientific research director, they lack living samples of mutants and need more experimental materials to find ways to suppress or even eliminate mutant genes by comparing data. This answer made Marcus furious, but he was helpless. He happened to have the idea of taking action against mutants, so he contacted the two guests today. The blazing fire released warm heat from the fireplace, and the weather gradually turned cooler. The elderly Marcus couldn't help but rub his hands. He was no longer an energetic young man. Just doing household chores and company affairs are enough to make him physically and mentally exhausted. If the business empire he has built throughout his life cannot be handed over to his son, then his lifelong struggle will be meaningless. Marcus's eyes flashed with fire. He couldn't just watch Warren turn into a monster. Who in the upper class would accept a mutant? While my thoughts were spinning, someone pushed the door open and came in. One was Senator Kelly, who often appeared on TV. He had a smile on his face and looked kind and friendly. The other had a serious face and a kind of solemnity that kept strangers away. Momentum. Colonel William Stryker and Senator Robert Kelly. Both of them have the same stance and concepts. They should know each other. I don't need to introduce them too much. Marcus stood up and greeted the two invited guests. As an army colonel, Stryker glanced at the senator, with a trace of contempt in his eyes. The other party only regarded his opposition to mutants as a kind of political capital. How could such a profit-oriented politician understand those freaks? The scary part. Mr. Watsonton, just say it if you have something to say. For a successful entrepreneur like you, every second is precious. Stryker chose a seat to sit down and picked up the table without hesitation. The wine glasses are served as if they were at home. Marcus's smiling face froze for a moment, and then returned to normal. Even though he didn't like the military colonel's tough style, he had to cooperate with the other party if he wanted to obtain the mutants' in vivo experimental data. Who in the military doesn't know that Colonel William Stryker has an unreasonable hatred and disgust for mutants? He has devoted himself to studying mutants since his youth. Some people even call him the Butcher, because he has no hands. Know how much mutant blood is stained on it. Senator, please take a seat. After Kelly took his seat, Marcus slowly spoke. I'm not very good at roundabout political negotiations. Just like Colonel Stryker said, let's be direct and formally enter the topic. Watsonton Company is very interested in mutants. I know that Senator Kelly is a pioneer in the fight against mutants, and Colonel Stryker advocates exterminating the group of freaks hiding in human society. I think everyone has this idea. We have the same stance, why can't we join forces? Marcus observed the faces of the two people and said calmly, I believe you all know the background of Watsonton. To put it bluntly, my ancestors came to this rich land on the Mayflower. No matter how many times this country has changed its rulers, Watson has always been firmly rooted in this country, has experienced countless ups and downs, and has never wavered. Senator Kelly's eyes lit up. As a politician with great ambitions, he certainly knew what kind of terrifying energy a chaebol group like Watsonton could mobilize. Many dignitaries from various departments were their guests, even in every presidential election, is an excellent investment opportunity for these capitalists. If he can get Watsonton's support, trigger a heated discussion in public opinion with his proposed mutant registration bill, and then attract more people's attention, maybe he will have the opportunity to go further. Marcus saw that Senator Kelly was moved, and then looked at Stryker. He never thought that anyone in this world could refuse the temptation of money and power at the same time. I heard that Colonel Stryker has been proposing to the White House to classify mutants as a dangerous group and arrest or imprison them in large numbers to prevent them from posing a threat to society. They are all a group of deformed freaks. From birth, the evil genes like a devil's curse have been lurking in their bodies. Most of them will show unique abilities by the time they reach adolescence, some of which are good and some are bad. Their appearance has reduced human beings to the lower class. The two races are destined to be unable to coexist. When the conflict escalates and conflicts break out, the mutants will imprison us in concentration camps and send us to gas chambers just like the Nazis did to the Jews. Quote. Stryker gushed that he had become interested in mutants a long time ago. At the Paris Peace Summit in 1973, Mr. Colonel, who was still a young boy at the time, saw the man known as Wolverine for the first time. This guy began to focus on the research of mutants. Later, because of the family tragedy that happened to him, he changed from a researcher of mutants to a cruel and cold executioner. Marcus and Senator Kelly disagreed with Stryker's words and felt that the other party was too alarmist. As the primates of all things, humans have evolved over tens of millions of years to become the masters of this beautiful planet, and mere mutants can people shake their own status. The two people who did not have a clear understanding of mutants laughed secretly in their hearts, especially Senator Kelly. He proposed the mutant registration bill just to attract public attention, build momentum for himself, and establish a positive image of being upright and unyielding. As for that, he didn't even pay attention to the mutants who were hiding in Tibet. Colonel Stryker really has a forward-looking vision. Mutants are indeed a parasitic disease on humans and a time bomb that threatens social security. If he just rashly launches a war between two ethnic groups, I'm afraid many people will not agree. After all, there are many short-sighted and incompetent people on Capitol Hill. Marcus echoed. This old man with sunken eyes was well versed in negotiation skills. He would first close the distance between each other, and then put forward conditions. At the same time, he would be aware of the opponent's psychological defense line and make seemingly reasonable concessions. Finally achieve the goal. Stryker's expression did not change. He knew that these vulture-like capitalists would not come to him for no reason. They must have needs. The cold soldier nodded slightly, agreeing with Marcus's words. His lifelong wish was to send the mutants hidden in human society to the dissection table one by one, so that they could end their filthy life in mourning and pain. Life. Watsonton can help Mr. Colonel. Marcus saw that the fire was almost done and threw out the bait. The laboratory needs more data on mutants for pair comparison and screening results, but making this request rashly will undoubtedly be rejected by Stryker. Those important core information are the other party's lifelong efforts. How can they get it without paying a huge price? Stryker smiled faintly. He had nothing to ask Watson for, and when negotiating a deal with such a wolf-like plutocratic group, the benefits would never fall on him in the end. In addition to being a forward-thinking scientist, his mentor Bolivar Teslaco was also a smooth and shrewd businessman. He founded Trask Industries and had close ties with state departments since the Nixon administration. A kind of political investment and a legal merger won the first pot of gold. Later, while Teslac was studying the mysteries of human DNA, he discovered the mutants further down the evolutionary path become extinct. Unfortunately, this talented scientist with good political skills and ambitions, with the outbreak of the Watergate scandal, the resignation of Nixon, who relied on him, Teslac was also implicated, accused of being a political prisoner, and imprisoned in a dark prison. Stryker took the opportunity to take away all of Teslac's achievements, took over the opponent's mutant research, and developed the subsequent Weapon X plan. As far as I know, Colonel Stryker's weapons have little appeal to them. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Of course he knew that Mr. Colonel was in a rather embarrassing situation recently. The research on mutants had achieved some results, but as time passed, neither the White House nor the military paid much attention to these hidden secrets. Special groups in human society therefore find it difficult to receive more investment, and the higher authorities even vaguely want to cut funds and close the dam base of Lake Ocalea. Stryker's eyes were gloomy. Marcus was indeed telling the truth. The military's resources are limited and it is impossible to invest in a research project that has no results for a long time. Moreover, General Ross, who was born as a general in the North, has recently established a separate research team is preparing to recreate the super soldier project of the last century and has received the support and consent of many people. Resources are limited. If some people get more, others will get less. The difficult situation led Stryker to even come up with a crazy and bold plan to control mutants to attack the White House and assassinate the president. He directed and staged a good show to convince the government that the existence of mutants was a huge threat in order to gain military power. Support with strength and gain resource tilt. General Ross is far more connected than you, and he has deep roots and a distinguished background. To recreate the Captain America of the last century and create a super legion. Such a plan will undoubtedly require huge investment. In comparison, is it necessary to continue research on mutants that has no future? Marcus laughed softly, and Senator Kelly next to him couldn't help but feel horrified. These scavenger-like Chable giants are really like the devil in Faust, dragging mankind bit by bit into the endless abyss full of temptations. Stryker's eyes changed. Of course, he understood that cooperating with these capitalists would often involve paying a heavy price beyond his imagination. If he was not careful, he might become an outcast and be kicked away by the other party at any time. What does Watson need from me? He didn't think that as an army colonel, he had anything that the other party could value. For a giant like this that dominates the U.S. medical market, the generals of the Department of Defense are happy to have a generous friend if they want. The mutant gene pool, Marcus wrote lightly. He knew that Stryker had taken over Teslac's lifelong efforts. After a large number of mutants were captured, the Army colonel built a mutant gene bank, which contained the genetic codes of mutants of all generations and had extremely huge scientific research value. Upon hearing Marcus's request, Stryker's eyes suddenly radiated a fierce light, like an enraged lone wolf, showing its sharp fangs. The mutant gene pool can be said to be the fruits and efforts of his life, and he will never give it to others, even at the cost of his life. Watsonton's appetite is a bit too much, Stryker said coldly. Even though he was facing the difficult situation of having his research funds cut off by the military, it was really unreasonable for the other party to easily take away the mutant gene pool from his hands. Please don't get me wrong. Marcus, like an experienced hunter, did not immediately push his prey into a blind corner. Instead, he relaxed slightly and said, I just want Colonel Stryker to open up part of the mutant gene pool. In return, I also will use some White House connections to make your situation a little easier. Isn't that how trust is slowly built? Watson never expects to enjoy a free lunch. Watsonton is conducting research on mutant inhibitors, so we need more experimental data and information. Colonel Stryker, you can provide me with these. And in order to show your sincerity in cooperation, the Ministry of Defense will not cut your funding. Cut your projects, and you'll get more. Marcus's tone is firm and seems to give people strong confidence. He has participated in countless business negotiations and knows how to defeat his opponent's psychological defenses step by step. It's like hunting. Slowly tighten the encirclement, but don't force the prey to the point where it can't go. Then they will struggle violently to resist, loosen a hold, make them relax their vigilance, and deliver the final fatal blow. Many shrewd politicians or profit-seeking businessmen fell at Marcus's feet like this, becoming a stepping stone for him to reach the top. Stryker pondered without speaking. He took off the glasses on the bridge of his nose and wiped them carefully. He was experiencing a fierce ideological struggle in his heart. The colonel did not want to share his achievements with others, but enjoying the cake alone also meant being alone. Take risks. I hope Watson won't let me down. Stryker sighed heavily, his gloomy eyes flashing with an unknown light. He needed Watson's strength to get through this difficulty. As for future cooperation, he sneered in his heart, maybe the leader of Watsonton would be interested in seeing the powerful power of mutants. After reaching a consensus, Stryker did not stay long. He exchanged a few words and then opened the door and left. Senator Kelly was not like an army colonel who acted resolutely. He and Watson had more room to communicate. After a pleasant confidential conversation, Senator Kelly received the expected promise and left with a relaxed and excited mood. The senator got into the car, remembered Marcus's instructions, and couldn't help but smile. Ha ha, Osborn and Umbrella, two weak opponents. Umbrella Laboratories. Dr. Connors worriedly walked into Sean's office with this morning's newspaper. The owner of this laboratory stood in front of the bright window, overlooking his private kingdom. Doctor, you look very ugly. I heard Dr. Zhao Hailun say that the research on cross-species inheritance is going very smoothly and is only one step away from success. Sean turned to look at Connors. The one-armed middle-aged man had such worry and anxiety in his eyes that he forgot to knock on the door and just broke into his office. Or is it that Umbrella encountered some difficulties that gave you such a headache? He asked softly with a gentle smile. Sean, Métis Pharmacy has not opened up the situation. Many public hospitals and pharmaceutical manufacturers are unwilling to cooperate with Osborn. 2/3 of the original pre-sale orders have been refunded and broken. Connors hesitated for a moment and handed Sean the latest newspaper. The headlines on it were Senator Kelly's criticism and opposition to genetic medicines, which had been in the spotlight recently. He believed that this kind of medicine could cure diseases. The method has unpredictable harmful effects and may even lead to the risk of some unpredictable mutation in the human body. At the same time, the following section also published a unanimous statement from many biologists. They believe that genetic drugs are not yet mature enough to completely cure diseases. They are often accompanied by unknown side effects and need to be carefully considered before use. The direction of public opinion has suddenly changed. Sean, who was praised by people a few days ago, is now in danger of falling from the clouds. As the saying goes, words make gold but accumulation destroys bones. The momentum of public opinion is promoted by the guidance of thoughtful people. The sun brought Osborn Industries and Umbrella to the forefront. The venture capital institutions that were previously very optimistic about the prospects of Métis Pharmacy immediately changed their rhetoric and maintained a vague stance and attitude. Watsonton took action. Sean casually threw the newspaper on the table and said nonchalantly, as a leader in the medical industry, Watsonton will not sit back and watch Osborn and Umbrella slowly grow and become a strong opponent that cannot be ignored. This giant company with deep roots and huge power will definitely unite the forces in the industry to drive away these two competitors who have rashly entered the private domain. Manipulating public opinion and maliciously criticizing are just the first step of testing, and many other methods will follow, until Osborne and Umbrella are beaten to the point where they kneel down and beg for mercy, giving up the richest piece of cake. Doctor, you don't need to worry too much. Although Umbrella is still a seedling and Watson is a towering tree, we are more vital. Sean walked up to Connors, who looked worried, and gently said, patting the other party on the shoulder, if you want to occupy a place in an industry and have a certain right to speak, you can't just rely on scientific research results. Sometimes, we have to use some reasonable means. Connors blinked his eyes and looked at Sean, who had a calm face. This young man always had a gentle smile on his face, and there was a chilling tone in his tone. The one-armed middle-aged man quickly lowered his head and said immediately, what about Harry? He must have also received these unpleasant news. Harry is not a child and needs to be coaxed all the time. Why do people fall? It's because we have to learn to get up. Watsonton's suppression is only temporary. The nature of businessmen is to pursue profits. They will soon find out who can bring more substantial benefits. Sean looked at the high-spirited Senator Kelly in the newspaper and said meaningfully, as for the senator who upholds justice, he should pray for God's blessing and hope that mutants will not come to his door. Seeing Dr. Connors leaving the office with complicated emotions, Sean's face gradually turned cold. It seemed that it was necessary to contact the hidden group of mutants. A military transport plane passed through the white clouds and landed on the tarmac with the sound of howling wind. Pepper Potts got out of the black car and looked up at the huge monster taxiing slowly at the airport. Tony Stark, who had been missing for nearly 3 months, finally returned to New York safely. This made Pepper finally let go of the huge stone in her heart. Her willful and reckless boss did not die on the front line of Afghanistan, where conflicts continued. As if favored by the goddess of luck, he successfully escaped from a group of vicious terrorists. When this news came back to New York, some people were happy and others were worried. For example, the top CEO of Stark Industries did not rush to the airport immediately to greet Tony, who survived the disaster, citing physical discomfort. The door of the transport plane slowly opened. Tony, wearing a suit jacket and a bandaged hand, stood up from the wheelchair. With the support of Colonel Rhodes, he slowly walked towards Pepper. With a slightly haggard face, bandaged arms, and a few small wounds, Pepper, who was full of expectations, almost didn't recognize it. This was Tony Stark, who paid attention to appearance and demeanor and liked to show off his charm. The circles under your eyes are red. Are you sad for your missing boss? Tony, who stepped off the transport plane, still did not change his previous style and teased the female secretary. I'm just happy that I don't have to find another job. Pepper retorted with a smile. This was the Stark she knew. Your vacation is over. Tony stopped smiling. Everything he experienced in the cave in Afghanistan made him gradually mature. The young soldiers who died on the battlefield, and Ethan who sacrificed his life to buy time, these people made Stark's cold heart slowly melt like ice. In his past world, there were only cold mechanical instruments and beautiful women. Tony, who thought he had everything in the world, didn't care about other people at all. If you want to win Tony's attention, unless you have a brain like a genius or a body that makes men's hormones soar, this playboy and genius will make you feel his harsh tongue and what ordinary people don't have. Arrogance. Where are you going, sir? Happy, the bodyguard, asked. Please take us to the hospital. Pepper was worried about Tony's physical condition and wanted him to do a full body check first. No, I don't want to go to the hospital now and have my body examined by various instruments. Tony refused without thinking. He interrupted Pepper's persuasion. I have been locked up for 3 months, and now I just want to do 2 things, one is eat a cheeseburger and the other is. Are you so impatient? The female secretary, whose thoughts were obviously led astray, turned her head with a look of disgust. Quote, It's not what you think, I just want to hold a press conference. Tony explained rather speechlessly. Could it be that in his secretary's mind, he is just a lustful playboy? Tony thought for a moment, recalling the ridiculous experiences in the past, and finally had to admit that maybe this was how most people had an impression of him. And he still can't refute. Tony shook his head and shook the inexplicable thoughts out of his mind. From today on, everyone will see a brand new Stark. Osborne Industries. Under the guidance of his secretary, Sean pushed open the door of the president's office. Harry was leaning on the sofa and watching the news reports, completely unaware of his sudden visit. On the TV screen, Tony Stark, who had disappeared for a while, sat under the podium, took out a burger from his pocket, and ate it. At the same time, he waved to the large group of reporters who were coming. "Can everyone sit down? This way you can see me and I can be more casual." This bohemian playboy still maintained his unconventional personal style. The news reporters with microphones and pens and paper, and the cameramen with long guns and short cannons had no choice but to bend their knees in accordance with each other's requests, sit on the floor. The hot and noisy press conference suddenly became a little funny, but the reporters with expectant eyes didn't care at all. "You know, this is the first public appearance of the famous billionaire Tony Stark after he disappeared for several months. Before that, there were even many gossips secretly circulating, claiming that this talented person, like a big star, on his way to the front line in Afghanistan to promote weapons, he was kidnapped and attacked by terrorists and died unfortunately." This unconfirmed false news was, of course, immediately denied by the person in charge of Stark Industries. Chief Executive Obadi claimed that Tony was just suffering from an illness and needed to be recuperated temporarily, and that all the company's affairs would be left to handle it yourself. Now, Tony Stark has appeared in person to hold a press conference. The news media people with keen sense of smell are like sharks smelling the smell of blood. They all want to get rid of this playboy who supports half of the New York paparazzi. Get eye-popping news. The bald CEO Obadiah had no choice but to follow Tony's temper and sat on the steps with a smile. His expression seemed to be happy to see Stark's safe return. "My father, the founder of Stark Industries, died in a car accident, so I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye to him." Tony wiped his greasy hands with his tie and said slowly, "Actually, I really want to ask him what his views are on the production of arms. Has he ever been conflicted or wavered, or is he, as reported by the media, a cold and ruthless arms dealer and an executioner who sells souls?" Stark's expression gradually became serious, and his cynical face became serious. Pepper, who was standing not far away, could vaguely see a hint of sadness and guilt in his boss's eyes. "I saw patriotic young men being killed on the battlefield by the very weapons I had built to protect them, and I saw that a system of which I was a part was fine with it. I completely woke up and realized that I could contribute more to this world besides making powerful weapons." Tony stood up and stood on the podium. His voice followed the microphone and echoed throughout the entire venue. "So, I decided to close the Stark Industries weapons manufacturing factory." Like a bomb being detonated, there was an uproar inside the venue. Senior reporters from the official department and news media people from major newspapers rushed to Tony Stark, raising their hands to ask questions in order to get the first place. Hands-on scoop. Although Obadiah tried hard to maintain a smile, trying to explain Tony's shocking remarks and ease the chaotic scene, no one paid attention to him at all. Everyone just wanted to get confirmation from Tony that Stark Industries, the largest in the United States, the arms giant, announced that it will stop manufacturing weapons. This news is enough to make tomorrow's newspapers go crazy. "Did you travel from the future?" Harry's first words when he turned back made Sean's heart beat faster. "The stock price of Stark Industries will definitely plummet. If I had known better, I should have invested more." Out of trust in his friends, Master Osborne invested a little money in the stock market under the guidance of a securities broker. Although deep down he did not believe that Stark Industries, which was at its peak, would suddenly see its stock price plummet. Condition. But with Tony Stark announcing the closure of the weapons manufacturing factory just now, there is no doubt that Stark Industries' stock price will begin to plummet tomorrow. As if Sean had anticipated this, he would naturally take advantage of this opportunity to make a fortune. "Maybe I am a prophet." Sean sat down calmly and said with a hint of mystery on his face. After Harry was surprised, he quickly returned to normal. It was just a joke between friends, but Tony Stark suddenly announced this decision, which was really surprising. No one thought that this playboy would make something equivalent to chronic suicidal folly. If an arms giant that occupies the top of the industry does not sell weapons, what else can it do? What's more, the direction of this arms giant cannot be decided by Tony alone. Even though he is the helmsman of Stark Industries, the midstream and downstream manufacturers that rely on large enterprises for survival, as well as the Ministry of National Defense, which gives a large number of orders every year. Neither would accompany Stark to make such silly jokes. Sean glanced at Tony Stark, who was surrounded by reporters on the TV. It must be that the Iron Man will not be easy in the near future. Business is not a game of playing house. As a behemoth, Stark Industries has already formed an intricate chain of interests. Countless people rely on it for survival, and the big shots share the delicious cake. How could all of this come to naught immediately with one word from Tony? Obadiah would not agree, and neither would the Ministry of National Defense. Abandoning the random thoughts in his mind, Sean looked at Harry, who had regained his composure, and said softly, "What you have to care about now is not Stark Industries." Harry couldn't help but feel a little distressed. Of course he saw the news in the newspaper. A senator directly spoke out and denounced the harm and side effects of genetic drugs, and there was also a group of biologists who echoed and cheered. This made the sales of Métis potion suddenly fell into trouble, and there was no good situation at all as expected. The board of directors' minds are agitated. They all want me to hand over the formula and share the benefits with Watsonton. Harry said angrily. Those people were not optimistic about the business competition between Osborn and Watson at all. I was put on the table like a mascot and couldn't actually make any decisions. Quietly listening to the dissatisfaction and complaints of the young president, Sean smiled lightly. As the heir to Osborn Industries, it would be difficult for Harry to get the approval of the board of directors before he had achieved corresponding results. No one would be willing to listen to a mediocre person who did nothing. People direct and led. The conflict between Osborn and Watson is a great opportunity for you to show off your abilities. Sean kept a relaxed smile. If a predator wants to occupy the top of the industry, he must establish his own prestige. There is no doubt that Watsonton, as the industry leader, is a good choice. If a Lion Group wants to elect a new leader, it must defeat the aging Lion King. Feeling Harry's doubtful eyes, a hint of mystery appeared on the young man's face. He patted the other party's shoulder and said confidently, "Soon Watson will be too busy to take care of himself. How can he have the energy to suppress Osborn? As for that, what will happen to a senator who plays a positive role if he offends mutants? Harry, all you have to do is continue to maintain confidence, wait until the time comes, and give Watson a fatal blow." Sean leaned comfortably on the sofa, staring at Tony Stark, who appeared repeatedly in the news with his deep eyes, and smiled slightly. "You will make the Osborn family more glorious." A black car, escorted by the police, slowly drove onto the tarmac. A burst of enthusiastic cheers erupted outside the cordon. The crowd holding signs shouted and shouted like fanatical star-struck fans. However, what came out of the car was not a glamorous Hollywood star, but Senator Kelly with a kind smile. As a rising political star, he was well known by the public for proposing the Mutant Registration Act. Familiar, his radical attitude towards mutants has won the favor of a group of racists. Kick the mutants out of America. Freak. Deformity. Mutants. Demons. Looking at the eye-catching slogan on the sign, Senator Kelly smiled proudly. The mutants hiding in human society made their first public appearance during the Cold War during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were competing for hegemony in the nuclear crisis. A shadow fell across the globe as mutants took to the world stage for the first time and became known to the world. It was not until that time that humans suddenly discovered that there was such a special group hidden around them. They were born with extraordinary powers and various strange abilities. They had been lurking in human society for a long time, trying to act like normal people. Character of mutants have always suffered from discrimination. With the development of modern society, views on this group have become increasingly polarized. Many elites believe that mutants threaten human rule and should be supervised or controlled. There are even suggestions to eliminate mutants to prevent crises from happening. Senator Kelly, who has a keen eye, saw an opportunity and became a vanguard against mutants and a righteous fighter for the safety of mankind. He repeatedly proposed that mutants should disclose their identities, set up a special department to register and control their lives. Carry out surveillance, and once a dangerous person is discovered, send him to jail immediately. This radical political proposition actually won the support of a large number of people. As a result, Senator Kelly, who was originally unknown, became a hot political star and received extremely wide attention. After waving to the shouting crowd, Smiling and speaking a few impassioned words to the cameras, Senator Kelly was led by his bodyguards and boarded the waiting helicopter. He is going to attend the high-end heads of state summit held on Liberty Island, where he will discuss the issue of mutants, which has attracted much attention. If the mutant registration bill he proposed is successfully passed, it will undoubtedly be a brilliance in Senator Kelly's political career. This means he can gain more support and gain substantial political capital. Congressman, do you support gun registration? Mutant children are more lethal than guns. Senator Kelly boarded the plane and started lobbying other senators with his mobile phone. There is no difference between the two. Let mutant children entering a school is undoubtedly letting children run rampant with guns, and you never know whether the bullet will be fired from the barrel of the gun. After speaking impassionedly for more than 10 minutes, Senator Kelly hung up the phone and threw the phone to the bodyguard. His smiling face instantly turned cold. These old foxes who are good at calculations all want to be the vanguard and charge into the battle, but they hide in the rear, holding vague positions and attitudes, and then jump out to seek benefits at the right time. This is a high-end heads of state summit that attracts global attention. You may be the biggest winner this time, the bodyguard said flatteringly. This is America, and we reject mutants. They are like time bombs, threatening the stability of society, so I advocate locking them all up. This is a war, and this country needs people like me to stand up. Senator Kelly leaned against the window, looking at the blue water below, and couldn't help but wonder, aren't we going to Liberty Island? When he turned his head again, the tall and muscular bodyguard had turned into a blue-skinned, red-haired woman, judging from her bumpy figure. Just as the senator was about to shout loudly, he was kicked to the seat by the other party, his yellow pupils flashing with hatred. It's because of people like you that I didn't dare to go to school when I was a child. A merciless blow knocked Senator Kelly unconscious. When he woke up, he was already in a dark and damp wide cave. His hands were handcuffed to a metal chair, and a hale and hearty old man walked away. Come, with a touch of pride in his eyebrows, like a king with his head held high. Who are you? Where is Henry? Senator Kelly asked in horror. He died a long time ago, Congressman, and Mystique is with you. The old man lowered his head and replied. She can become anyone. If you hurt me, it won't do any good, but will prove the validity of my claims. The old man smiled contemptuously. He looked down at the trembling senator and asked, are you afraid of God? This sentence is a bit strange. I think God is a mentor, a light, wisdom and spiritual comfort. In fact, what you fear in your heart is, me. We mutants have extraordinary abilities. The old man turned around, and following his footsteps, the metal chair on which Senator Kelly was sitting also moved slowly, as if being pulled by some strange force. I'm not surprised. Human beings have always been afraid of unfamiliar things. Don't be afraid of God, don't be afraid of me, you will never have to be afraid again. The lights inside the cave lit up one by one, and a strange metal instrument came into the senator's eyes. The old man slowly climbed up and placed his hands on the cylinder. The two semicircular arcs of metal above his head seemed to be activated and rotated rapidly. Stand up. What exactly do you want to do? Senator Kelly's heart became more and more panicked. Only then did he remember who the old man was, the extremist who believed mutants were better than humans, the leader of mutants who had the ability to manipulate magnetic fields and control metal. Eric Lancel. Among the mutant community, they prefer to call him Magneto. It is said that this terrorist, who was imprisoned in a concentration camp since childhood, once assassinated President Kennedy, and even planned a crazy plan to destroy the world and establish a mutant nation. Senator Kelly has seen Magneto's name in many materials. Compared to another moderate leader among the mutants, this old man who leads the Brotherhood has a group of mutants who hate humans gathered around him, plotting to overthrow the human government and replace it with mutants. To make you one of our own, of course, Counselor. Magneto smiled faintly, and the rapidly rotating metal instrument emitted soft white light, like the light of rippling water slowly spreading, engulfing Senator Kelly, who was handcuffed on the chair. After a short time, the light suddenly shrank and disappeared, and Senator Kelly's eyes were dull, as if he had lost his soul. The weak Magneto was supported by Mystique and walked up to him, saying with a sarcastic smile, "Congratulations, Congressman. You have become one of us." Proud mutant. Daily Bugle, editor's office. Boss James's roar penetrated the wall and resounded throughout the newspaper office. but everyone seemed to take it for granted and continued working as usual, while silently praying for poor Peter. After all, not everyone could accept the wanton abuse of the mean boss. "Parker, you're fired." Today seemed to be particularly unlucky. Peter, who had just lost his pizza delivery job, heard another shocking news. Looking at the puzzled expression of the rookie cameraman, James held a cigar in his mouth, threw the photos in his hand on the table, and mocked. The puppy catching the frisbee, the pigeons in the park, the two old men playing chess. Tell me, who would like to see this? I just want to show the warmer side of New York City. Shut up. When you are so poor that you can't even afford a hamburger, and you can't pay the rent and are kicked out by your landlord, you will understand that New York is really the sweetest place in the world. James cursed without hesitation. The reason why he recruited this rookie intern named Peter Parker was because he could provide the newspaper with photos of Spider-Man. I'm not paying you to do art, I'm paying you because Spider-Man will only let you take pictures, but the masked hero flying around the building is outdated. People like to see Tony Stark as a playboy. And those weird mutants. James spoke very fast. He blew out a mouthful of cigar smoke and continued. Take these disgusting photos away, lest I spit out my overnight meal. Peter silently took the photo from the table. The life of this young Spider-Man was quite embarrassing. While he was busy with academic exams, he also had to be a good neighbor in New York. He even had to find time to work part-time to earn money. Get rent and living expenses. Compared with Harry, who inherited the family business, Sean, who became famous, and Mary Jane, who struggled for her dream of becoming a star, he looked even more shabby and simple. Constantly switching roles between the insignificant Parker and the popular Spider-Man, this immature young man can't help but feel a little confused, as if he can't find the important direction in life and can only move forward aimlessly alone. You won't even accept one. I'm really short of money. Peter begged in a low voice. Miss Brown, please bring me a tissue and let me wipe away my tears. James was not moved at all. Instead, he said harshly and sarcastically. He was not a good person who showed great kindness. The deputy editor in charge of the newspaper's headlines hurried into the office. The deadline was 6 minutes away, but the headline page was still not available. The news about Stark Industries had passed. The Playboy had been hiding at home all day without going out, so everyone has turned their attention to the increasingly serious mutant problem. And with the convening of the Supreme Heads of State Summit, it is said that the Mutant Registration Act will be passed, and a special mutant community will be established by then to distinguish those dangerous elements from ordinary people. Okay, you can leave, Mr. Parker. Remember to tell Spider-Man that he has expired and is not worth another $300 for me to buy a photo. James waved his hand impatiently. He is worrying about what news should be reported in the headlines. Is it the Merchant of Death who is repenting, or is it the Playboy who is putting on a high-profile show? Or take out Spider-Man and criticize it again. Even Hell's Kitchen has become quiet recently. Daredevil and the Punisher, who used to frequent the place, seem to have all disappeared, and no trace can be found again. Why can't those mutants join a big conspiracy to destroy New York? James complained. Doesn't the news industry need eye-catching, exciting content? Peter, who was dejected and ready to leave, suddenly turned around and sat down again when he heard the word mutant, and took out a few beach photos from his bag. If I want to see bikinis, I can buy Playboy or Penthouse. The content there is more exciting. James glanced at the photo and curled his lips. There is nothing outstanding about these photos. They are nothing more than beach scenery and bikini girls. Any photographer who wanders around Manhattan can take such things. Look at this. Peter pulled out a photo. It was a naked figure that looked like a mud monster. The man without clothes. Hey, Senator Kelly, the sponsor of the Mutant Registration Act. James was about to curse, but he recognized the person in the photo. He excitedly picked up the phone on the table and said loudly, "Tell Grant, there is a headline today, and the title is, Shocked. The true face of the anti-mutant fighter turns out to be like this. What makes Tony Stark and Spider-Man go to hell?" James signed a check neatly, handed it to Peter, and said with a rare smile, "If you can continue to maintain this level, instead of taking pictures of shitty warm New York, then I can consider making you an official member of the Daily Bugle staff." Holding the check for $500, Peter walked out of the newspaper office and couldn't help but thank his old classmate Sean. It was the other person who called him. If he revealed the details of Rockaway Beach in Queens, there might be something unexpected. News material. With a skeptical attitude, Peter walked around the beach with his camera for a whole day. During this period, except for a naked mutant who caused panic among the crowd, nothing surprising happened. Peter, who has never paid much attention to political news, would have never imagined that the mutant would turn out to be Senator Robert Kelly, a rising political star who has attracted much attention from the outside world. A righteous fighter against mutants is actually a mutant himself. Is there anything more surprising and absurd than this? With the style of the Daily Bugle, they will definitely promote conspiracy theories, such as mutants infiltrating the government or secretly planning shocking plans. As a leader among gossip tabloids, Boss James will never let go of any eye-catching news. And he never follows the mainstream. Just like when Spider-Man was loved by New York citizens, he chose to criticize the superhero and win good sales through this unconventional way. After cashing the check, Peter secretly wondered, how did Sean know that Senator Kelly would be there? And prepare yourself there. The young Spider-Man didn't think much about it. He looked at the money in his wallet and was satisfied. At least this month's rent was paid and he didn't have to work hard to find another part-time job. At the same time, Sean, who was staying at Umbrella, turned on his computer and looked at the files sent by Skynet, with a cold smile on his lips. All of the above are data and materials about Watson Company's use of mutants to conduct human experiments. Those bloody and cruel photos make people feel terrible just looking at them. There are also many video files of vivisection. Stryker's mutant gene pool is really a huge treasure trove. Sean couldn't help but sigh. In this world, mutants are undoubtedly the key to opening the door to evolution. The future is the era of superpowers. Of course, Umbrella's rise cannot be separated from this special group of talented people. A black Bentley parked at the door of Watsonton Building. Marcus Watson and the accompanying bodyguards got out of the car. Before they could step into the door, a group of news reporters rushed toward this man like a black ant colony. The leaders of the Chable group rushed over, and even though they were blocked by a few strong security guards, they couldn't stop them from asking a barrage of questions. Mr. Watsonton, there are rumors on the internet that your laboratory is using mutants to conduct illegal human experiments. Are these true? It is said that there is an improper transaction between Watsonton Company and Senator Robert Kelly. Did Senator Kelly accept Watsonton's experiment and become a mutant due to side effects of gene mutation? Quote. News after news exploded in Marcus's ears like thunder. He tried his best to remain calm without saying a word. Surrounded by security guards with a cold face, he pushed through the swarming journalists and entered the Watsonton building. Arriving at the office in the elevator, Marcus, who had accumulated a lot of anger, summoned his senior employees and asked, "Who can tell me what happened?" Hamilton, who was in charge of the market, turned on the computer cautiously. All the news media and portals were filled with all kinds of news about Watsonton. There was overwhelming negative news, the tragic scenes of the mutants struggling in pain, and videos of being brutally dissected. Pictures are spreading on the internet at a rapid speed. 20 minutes ago, someone anonymously spread this information online. Marcus felt his head was dizzy. He tried hard to maintain a cold expression and took a few deep breaths to calm his inner anxiety. With many years of rich experience in fighting in shopping malls, he could tell at a glance that someone was behind this and was deliberately guiding him. Follow the trend of public opinion. For example, the Daily Bugle, which was the most vicious critic of Watsonton, was a little-known gossip tabloid. It didn't know where it found detailed and credible photos and information, and published them on its front page. Moreover, the content of the newspaper clearly hinted that Watson, the Dayton Company, and Senator Kelly, whose true identity was revealed to be a mutant, have an ulterior secret deal. One is a despicable politician who is willing to betray his fellow mutants for fame, and the other is inhumane and relies on blood and violence to make wealth, unscrupulous capitalists. In the report written by Jonah James, the owner of the Daily Bugle, there are even hints, intentionally or unintentionally, that Osborne and Umbrella were criticized by Senator Kelly not long ago, which was actually the result of someone trying to monopolize the medical industry. The plutocratic group that prevents the development of new forces has secret instructions. As for who the other party is, the cunning newspaper owner will naturally not name him by name, but leaves room for readers to make up their own minds. This gossip tabloid, which has always liked to report some gossipy news, stood up faster than the official media, as if a righteous man who was not afraid of power was the first to make his voice heard. Immediately afterwards, other media also rushed to report, fearing that they would be half a step behind their peers in the industry. Watsonton was suddenly pushed to the forefront. The huge pressure of public opinion forced the government departments to intervene. In just 20 minutes, this industry-occupying company, the giant companies at the top, seemed to be reduced to street rats that everyone wants to beat. After seeing the current situation clearly, Marcus thought of the competitors who were eyeing him and the news that was extremely unfavorable to the company. This was not something that could be settled by just relying on crisis public relations or money power. Once this scandal continued to ferment, it would trigger a social crisis, discussion and criticism, then Watsonton may fall into the dust. When a tiger is majestic, all the beasts in the forest will grovel and show their loyalty. But as soon as it shows signs of aging, other beasts will immediately jump out, opening their sharp fangs and claws. Who is behind all this? Marcus was puzzled. Could it be that little Osborne and the so-called New York genius, these fledgling young people, really had such ruthless methods? The old man stood a little unsteadily and put his hands on the table. He would rather believe that this was the work of a certain capital tycoon who had his eye on Watsonton. He took the lead in detonating a public opinion offensive, seizing the moral high ground, and taking advantage of the mutant issue that the government was concerned about, to deal a fatal blow to Watsonton. A series of methods almost left the opponent unable to counterattack. After getting rid of the chill in his heart, Marcus discussed countermeasures with the senior management present and actively asked the public relations department to issue a notice. He himself also contacted some political figures who had good personal relationships with Watson to deal with this sudden crisis. Harry walked into Umbrella happily, his previous depression swept away. Like a general returning in triumph, Harry rushed directly to Sean's office. "Can you knock on the door first next time?" Sean was busy signing a bunch of documents without raising his head. "Maybe I'm flirting with the secretary in the office, and you barging in like this will make the situation awkward." Harry waved his hands nonchalantly and revealed, "I remember you don't have a secretary at all. Don't you consider getting one for yourself? In your capacity, you really need a secretary to help you handle trivial matters, as well as a bodyguard responsible for security. Perhaps I can introduce him to you. I guarantee that he has a good figure and appearance. I know a ballet dancer." As he said that, Master Osborne moved the topic aside. "I guess you came here in a hurry just to talk to me about women." Sean looked up helplessly and ended the previous topic. Harry suddenly remembered the purpose of his trip, and he couldn't hide the joyful smile on his face. He could hardly help but jump up to express his inner excitement. Watsonton is going to be in trouble. He laughed, thinking of his high-spirited performance at the board meeting this morning. It was revealed that he was conducting illegal human experiments. The major media followed up and broke the news. It is said that some government departments have intervened. The stock price collapsed faster than Stark Industries. God is just, punishing the wicked and treating the righteous kindly. Sean said lightly. He was not surprised by this result. However, it is too simplistic to want to use this to bring down a chaebol group. As a monopoly giant in the medical industry, Watsonton Company may suffer heavy losses, but it is impossible to collapse. The interest forces standing behind them will not sit back and watch this behemoth fall easily. "You seem to have known it for a long time." Harry's eyes were strange. His friend always seemed to know everything in advance and be prepared. "Have you forgotten? I have a pair of eyes that can see through the future." Harry curled his lips. He didn't believe this kind of magical rhetoric. "Then I would rather believe that you learned some mysterious magic of divination from the gypsies. What should we do next? Should we take advantage of the victory and give Watson a little pain? The vengeful Master Osborne has not forgotten Watson's severe suppression before. Don't do anything. Someone will naturally seek justice for us." Sean glanced at the newspaper on the table. Presumably, the owner of the Daily Bugle must have received his kindness in return. After all, this is a beacon country of freedom and democracy. A smile appeared on the young man's lips, with a hint of sarcasm in his tone. After Harry left with joy, Sean leaned on the chair and looked up at the empty space. He remembered a theory he had heard in his previous life. After most people reached a certain level, there would be no room for upward promotion. Getting smaller and smaller, unable to break the ceiling above our heads, we can only stagnate. In such a dangerous and wonderful world, personal power is of course crucial. It can protect you from being hurt and bullied, and maintain your dignity and bottom line. But power alone is not enough. Sean has been trying. After sketching out the general outline of the world and gaining power, he once tried to do whatever he wanted, treating it all as a game and enjoying the fun as much as he wanted. But he soon gave up on this idea. Even with the undeveloped power of the Sentinel in his body and the system that had no sense of existence, he seemed unable to do whatever he wanted. Who knew, except for those movie characters, will an unreasonable comic character, the God Group, suddenly pop up? Life Court, or even some unimaginable higher being who is omniscient and omnipotent. Rather than showing off casually and then slamming into the ceiling, it is better to slowly accumulate strength until you break through the invisible barriers that limit yourself. Sean smiled softly. He remembered that in a certain tactical competitive game in his previous life, those who survived to the end were the insidious guys who managed not to take the lead. Does the public opinion offensive on the internet need to continue to expand? An indifferent voice sounded in the office. Sean was not surprised. Skynet's trumpet Red Queen kept monitoring Umbrella at all times, while it itself was overlooking this planet. Stop it for the time being. After all, if you go too far by inviting Navy troops, it will be easily seen by others. He shook his head. Watsonton's scandal would spread so quickly, of course, thanks to the power of Skynet, which almost destroyed all mankind in another world. This artificial intelligence is like an omnipotent god on the internet, with countless incarnations. Vest, it's not easy to be a righteous keyboard warrior who criticizes unscrupulous companies. A blow of this level can only cause a little trouble for Watsonton. Even if the Judicial Department intervenes in the investigation, the final outcome will only be to introduce a few scapegoats, and then nothing will happen. Sean closed his eyes slightly, and his mental power was like an invisible thread, slowly extending towards the void. After the unlocking level reached 25%, in addition to physical transformation, he seemed to have developed psychic abilities. If things continue to develop, maybe it won't be long before Sean can face the most powerful mind controller in the world calmly. So far, the only dangerous people who can make him feel threatened are Dr. Bruce Banner, who will be exposed to gamma-ray radiation and transform into the Hulk in the future, and Professor X, who is always swimming in the ocean of the soul and can enter the human mind at any time. The former has almost unlimited terrifying power, while the latter can easily control anyone's mind. Unless, like Magneto, he always wears a special helmet that can block mental influences, anyone who confronts him head-on has no chance of winning. Of course, the mutant executioner William Stryker once used conspiracy and tricks to make the world's most powerful mind controller almost kill all his compatriots. But it is not easy to avoid the prying eyes of a mind controller. Sean sighed softly. It seemed that he could only use the verbal attack tactic, which is a must-have secret skill for the protagonist. There will be bread, there will be milk, there will be everything. He murmured softly. Seafront Villa, Stark Mansion. I've been calling you, didn't you hear the intercom? The tall female secretary carried coffee to the underground laboratory, where Tony, who had returned from the front line in Afghanistan, had been staying. To be honest, this huge change almost made Pepper doubt whether it was his boss who came back. Although Tony would have days where he could stay in the laboratory and invent and create with peace of mind, but those days usually didn't last too long. And during this period, he actually didn't bring those messy women back to spend the night. This kind of contrasting behavior is really not in line with Tony Stark's usual personal style. Cold machines and gentle and charming women will always be this mustached man's favorite. What's the matter? Tony asked casually. He was busy adjusting the machine on his arm, which looked like an energy cannon. Obadiah is waiting for you upstairs, I think you should go see him. Pepper put down the coffee in his hand and suggested softly. You must know that the situation of Stark Industries is not optimistic. Tony's remarks about closing the weapons manufacturing factory directly caused the stock price to plummet like an avalanche. If possible, the people on the board of directors should really want to kill this willful flower. Young master. Didn't you say you won't make weapons anymore? Pepper watched as his boss raised his arm, the energy cannon in his palm flashing white light. It's just a flight stabilizer, it won't cause much harm. Tony curled his lips and tapped the button to start the energy. With a bang, the huge recoil directly threw Stark against the wall. Looking at the secretary who seemed to be frightened, Tony smiled reluctantly and said, "It was an accident." After directing his smart butler Jarvis to tidy up the messy underground laboratory, Tony walked upstairs with a relaxed pace. He had never been so comfortable as he was now. He closed the Stark Industries weapons manufacturing factory and no longer continued along the same path. Continue to follow the path of his father. He has always been himself, the unique Stark. Tony saw Obadiah with pleasure. The top executive was sitting in front of a Steinway piano, his fingers gently playing soothing melodies. Compared to Tony Stark, who likes to pick up girls and make inventions, Obadiah is more like the helmsman of a giant company. He has amiable social skills, loves classical music and fine cigars, and has extremely strict behavioral standards. In line with the image of the rich and upper-class society. "How is the company?" Tony asked aloud. "Well, I can tell by the look on your face that this is a bad situation. The board of directors feels that your post-traumatic stress disorder is very serious and is going to issue an injunction. In other words, they are going to kick you out." After Obadiah played a short piece of piano concerto in C major, he sat down to Tony around. "Just because the stock plummeted 40 points. Didn't we expect it a long time ago?" Tony slammed the sofa and said loudly. "It dropped 56.5 points. Pepper reminded at the side. "Someone is secretly shorting Stark Industries stock." "That's not important, the controlling rights are in our hands," Tony asked emotionally. "He took over Stark Industries from his father who died accidentally. This is the only thing left to him by his family. Tony will never allow anyone to take it away. Tony, the board of directors also has rights. They are looking for excuses to get you out, saying that you and your latest research direction are not in line with the best interests of the company." Obadiah looked helpless, as if he was also having a headache over this. In fact, the reason why the board of directors made this decision was all secretly instigated by the bald CEO. Tony, who forced himself to defend himself, suddenly felt upset and angry. He did not close the weapons manufacturing factory without reason. New energy is the future direction of Stark Industries, and the market is broader than the arms business. "I'm trying to think of ways to help you save the situation, but you have to give me a suitable reason to find a few engineers to analyze this thing." Obadiah stared at the luminous body on Tony's chest, greed flashing in his eyes. "Don't even think about it." As if being touched, Tony stood up and left angrily. The arc reactor gave him a new fire of life. No one could touch it, even if he was as close as Obadiah. If he made this request rashly, Tony would mercilessly reject it. Looking at Tony, who was quickly leaving, the bald CEO's face stiffened for a moment, and then his smile returned to his face, as if nothing happened. Manhattan, Battery Park. An ordinary-looking middle-aged man walked through the busy avenue, carrying a black briefcase, walked into a narrow and dark alley, followed the route in his memory, and came to a building hidden deep in the block. Old building. He pressed the bell outside the door. After a while, the small window on the door opened, revealing a vigilant face. "Who are you looking for?" "Mutated and proud," the middle-aged man replied coldly, and the two parties exchanged signals like joint agents during the Cold War. With a clang, the reinforced iron door was opened, and the man carrying the briefcase walked straight in without squinting. The moment he stepped into the door, the ordinary middle-aged man suddenly changed. Under the black windbreaker, a bumpy blue body appeared. Mystique walked gracefully in this old building from the last century. You can occasionally see some weird-looking guys on the way. They are all recruited by Magneto and have unique superpowers. Boom! A burly body was thrown at the feet of Mystique Raven like a cannonball. She paused and realized that it was Victor, a saber-toothed tiger with a weak mind. This beast with low IQ didn't know how to offend him. Angry at the bad-tempered mutant leader. There was a loud sound from upstairs, like the sharp sound of countless metal collisions. Raven turned her head and looked at Toad squatting in the corridor. Eric rarely got angry like this. She couldn't imagine what was going on. Who angered the powerful Magneto? Mystique twisted her waist and walked upstairs. The room that belonged to Magneto was in a mess. Papers were scattered on the floor like snowflakes. All the metal tables, chairs and utensils were overturned. The initiator of all this destruction, Waste standing in front of the computer with his back straight, like a silent statue. What happened, Eric? Magneto calmed down his anger. There were only a few people in the world who would call him that. Since humans want a war, then I will satisfy them. The old man wearing a helmet said in a cold voice. The web news on the computer screen was all about mutants being captured and killed for illegal in vivo experiments. Raven stepped forward and browsed through it roughly. Angry fire appeared in her yellow pupils, and her eye sockets were slightly red. Looking at the cruel situation of those compatriots being tied to the operating table and being slaughtered like livestock, hatred was like a raging fire. It gnawed at the heart, and bursts of tearing pain eroded the body. Eric, this is the reason why Charles and I parted ways. He always believed that human beings are full of beauty and goodwill, so he looked forward to the day when mutants could coexist harmoniously with humans and live together on this planet. Magneto has regained his composure. He stared at the news report on the computer with a sneer on his face. He has forgotten, or is unwilling to admit it, that no race will accept a group of aliens, especially if they can also pose a threat to themselves. This is not racial discrimination, but a complete racial war. Mutants need a better life. We are tired of being hunted, ostracized, hiding here and there, like rats in the ditch. We are neither aliens nor freaks. Mutants are the pioneers on the road of evolution, and we are proud of our innate talents. This time, I want the whole world to face our existence. Even Charles, you can't stop me. Magneto's tone is passionate. He has been dormant for half a century. He believes that the time has come. The mutants have had enough of hiding in the dark. They want to make a formal appearance on the stage and make their voice heard to the world. The high-end heads of state summit on Liberty Island is undoubtedly an excellent opportunity. Magneto designed a conversion device that can mutate the genes of ordinary people into mutants, although during the forced transformation process, the original human body will be violently destroyed. The stable gene chain leads to the collapse of one's own genes, and at least half of the people will die as a result. But this mutant leader who hates humans doesn't care about this. He wants to warn humans in this way that mutants are not vulnerable objects to be slaughtered. They are lions with sharp claws, and humans themselves are just the weak lambs. Maybe we can change our approach to sound a wake-up call to those humans. Magneto looked at the graphic information on the computer screen and couldn't help but recall the miserable days when he was imprisoned in the Auschwitz concentration camp. Every day he worried about being sent to the gas chamber or becoming the object of fun of an officer. Those were the darkest days that Eric had ever experienced. He witnessed with his own eyes how the Nazi officers slaughtered the Jews as if they were livestock, driving them into the pit, and then shot and buried them, or sent them to the gas chambers. Used to test the powerful lethality of chemical weapons. It turned out that Eric could not escape such a tragic fate. A famous scientist named Sebastian Shaw discovered that he was different. In order to stimulate the powerful abilities in his body, the other party shot his mother face to face. In an extremely angry mood, he awakened the innate ability to control magnetic fields, and thus began the legendary life of Magneto. Before meeting his old friend Charles, who fell in love and killed each other, Eric lived only for revenge. But after killing Shao, he chose to fight for his compatriots, inheriting the enemy's ideas in disguise and building a beautiful country for mutants. I thought the plan to attack Liberty Island was too risky before. Politicians from so many countries were killed as a result, and mutants would become public enemies of the world. But there is no problem in taking action on Watson Company. The human government may be angry, but that's not the case. It touches their sensitive nerves. Mystique Raven put her arm around Eric's shoulders. Because of her plan to attack Liberty Island, she disguised herself as a government servant and secretly obtained the list of dignitaries participating in the summit, as well as the itinerary and security arrangements. As one of Magneto's most trusted helpers, Raven does not agree with Eric's attack plan. This will not change the difficult situation of fellow mutants. Instead, it will arouse suppression and vigilance from the human government, completely setting off a conflict between the two races, war between. At that time, the living environment for mutants will become more difficult than during the Cold War, and the fragile peace that Charles has carefully maintained for many years will be broken in an instant. You're right, now is really not the best time to confront human conquest. Magneto followed Raven's suggestion, and he sighed softly. Raven, you are still so young, and Charles and I are already old. Mystique fell silent. The high-spirited Magneto in her memory had quietly become an old man with wrinkles on his face. Although he was still full of strength, he was no longer young. Charles and I have taken different paths, but our original intentions are the same. We both hope that our compatriots can live freely in this world and no longer fear other people's strange eyes. Magneto's eyes were full of nostalgia. Who could have imagined that half a century ago, he and Professor X, another leader of the mutants, trusted each other and fought side by side. Curbing his occasional nostalgic emotions, Magneto's face gradually became as cold as steel, and he said in a deep voice, "I want to use Watsonon's destruction to remind the world that mutants are not weak lambs who can be bullied." Quote. Baxter Building, rooftop. Under the white parasol, 3 figures were sitting talking freely, taking a sip of ice-cold drinks. Sean smiled brightly and said, "I read many of your papers in college. At that time, you were already a genius at Columbia University. Has received multiple doctorates, and everyone is saying that Reed Richards is a well-deserved absolute genius." The young man sitting opposite him was quite shy, and there was a sense of restraint in his actions. Only his bright eyes shone with the light of wisdom. In Mindy's words, he was a textbook elegant scholar. Image. "Thank you for the compliment, Sean." The young man known as Reed smiled and said softly, "I am far from as good as you said. Science is a towering mountain that can never be climbed to the top, Jay Bai. Ni said that man's bounden duty is to have the courage to explore the truth. I like to delve into and decipher those unknown things, unravel their mysterious veils, and find answers from them." Ahem, Sean, to be honest, I really didn't know we lived in the same building. The burly Ben interrupted his friend's tirade. At the same time, he winked at Reed. This was not an academic debate. Who would like to listen to boring and profound theories? The future Mr. Fantastic stopped the topic awkwardly, but found that Sean did not show boredom on his face. Instead, he spoke the philosophical words of another great scientist, "In the ocean of truth, let all things that have not been discovered lie in my before your eyes, let me explore." The path of scientific exploration is boring for those who stand outside the door, but full of interest and joy for those who walk inside. Sean waved his hands, showing a gentle attitude that made people feel like spring breeze. "I am not the kind of financier or speculator that Dr. Richards thinks. I only have interests in my eyes. Only research projects that can create profits are valuable. The development of science should it is to promote progress and change in human society." Reed was stunned for a moment, and then felt a little excited. He had recently approached many group companies for funding for his research projects, but almost all of them received a cold reception. Those capitalists who expected to see profit prospects thought he was fanciful. They all ridiculed it and claimed that it was definitely a failed investment. Compared with the attitudes of those people, Sean, who represented Osborne Industries and Umbrella, undoubtedly showed a very good attitude. The respect that was revealed inadvertently made Reed, who had hit the wall many times, feel very comfortable. "The agent told me before that Dr. Richards also lives here. I was thinking about visiting him in person sometime, but I didn't expect you guys to come to my door." Sean said lightly that Umbrella had previously sent an invitation to this intelligent and talented scientist, but at the time Reed seemed to be addicted to a failed relationship and had no intention of continuing his research, so he declined politely. In the original timeline, after hitting a wall many times, Reed had no choice but to find his former classmate and rival, Victor Doom, with a frustrated mood. With the others' funding, he rented a space agency spaceship, but due to an error in calculating the speed of the cosmic storm, Reed and his team were instantly engulfed by violent cosmic rays. The strong radiation changed their body structure and genetic chain, causing them to undergo strange changes. This is the origin of the famous superhero group, the Fantastic Four. "Sorry, although I received an invitation from Umbrella before, I can't give up the project I have been researching for many years. You have outstanding achievements in the field of biology, but my research directions are engineering, mathematics and physics, so after thinking about it again, I still declined Dr. Connors's kind invitation." In fact, seeing Sean's good attitude, the future Mr. Fantastic regretted it very much. After rejecting Umbrella's invitation, he was almost on the verge of bankruptcy. The Aerospace Administration did not trust this genius's experimental project and was unwilling to do anything for it. He provided funds, and Reed, who had no choice but to accept Victor's harsh conditions, was forced to accept Victor's harsh conditions. For this reason, Reed has to pay 75% of the profits of this project, including applications and patent rights, while Victor invests $1 billion in capital and leases a spacecraft. So this time, why did you and Ben find me? Sean got to the point. He didn't believe that these two people would find him for no reason. As far as I know, the Doom Group has announced its cooperation with you. In 6 weeks, you will conduct the first test in outer space to collect data on cosmic rays. Reed coughed a few times and seemed a little embarrassed. As a genius who had already surpassed the academic master and was promoted to the level of academic god, he was actually relatively weak in social aspects. There were 5 people involved in this trial, Ben and I, Susan Storm, who directed the genetic research, and her brother Johnny, and Victor Doom, our investment people. Reed paused for a moment, observing Sean's expression. After seeing that the other party showed no impatience, he continued, but during the experiment of collecting data, we also need a biologist who is good enough to map genes for us. Map. Sean was quite surprised, maybe because he had never played the role of a scientist before, so Sean was really surprised that Reed invited him to participate in this trip to outer space. Don't worry, this experiment is very safe and there will definitely not be any danger. Seeing Sean didn't answer, Reed thought the other person was worried about safety issues and immediately assured him. Looking at Reed, who set the flag, Sean was speechless. As a time traveler who is familiar with the plot, he certainly knew that this trip to outer space was destined to be a failed experiment, and it also created the Fantastic Four in destruction. Ph.D. Sean, as you said before, the development of science is to promote human progress and change the existing world. Before the starting point of the birth of time, a huge explosion occurred in a dense and hot singularity. After continuous expansion, the universe was formed. According to my research, the early evolution of life on Earth was most likely due to the high-energy cosmic rays generated by the solar wind. Within 6 weeks, another cloud with the same elements will pass through the orbit of the Earth. The secrets of the evolution of life and the process of genetic evolution are all buried in it. By observing cosmic storms, we can obtain unprecedented data, and then decipher the mysteries of human genetic genes. If we succeed, we will change the world. Reed's mood gradually became aroused, and Ben beside him couldn't help rolling his eyes. Once academic research or scientific problems were involved, this friend would burst out with far more enthusiasm than usual. If it weren't for this character who was obsessed with research and could not extricate herself, how could Susan leave with a disappointed mood and turn to Victor's arms? I'm honored to be able to witness such a miracle. Sean stretched out his hand. He looked at the dazzling sun in the sky and seemed to have another plan in mind. Thank you, Sean. Reed was stunned for a moment, and then he reacted and couldn't help showing a surprised expression. He didn't expect that the other party would agree so easily. Going to outer space is not a relaxing and beautiful trip. It is very dangerous. Reed has long been mentally prepared to be rejected. I told you a long time ago that Sean will agree to help. Ben laughed, opened a bottle of beer and took a swig. The young man who quickly won the favor of the two people smiled faintly and looked towards the island in Manhattan. There was a burst of thick smoke rising into the sky conspicuously. Chapter 89. The afterglow of the setting sun shines on Midtown Manhattan. The traffic winds like a long queue on the streets extending in all directions, and the crowded crowds are as small as ant colonies. If you are lucky enough to stop on the east-west streets, you can enjoy the famous, hanging sun, the rare beauty of the sun hanging over the tall buildings on both sides at sunset. Marcus stood in front of the transparent floor-to-ceiling windows. Watson Tower was like a steel giant standing between heaven and earth, and he was the helmsman at the top, overlooking all living things in the world. Recently, the owner of the group who controls huge wealth and hidden power has been having a lot of headaches. As a monopoly giant in the medical industry, Watson & Company is also in a bad situation. An opponent hidden in the dark has given this monopoly giant a fatal blow. Those laboratories are scattered on the internet and spread at a rapid speed. The information has become conclusive evidence that Watson secretly conducted illegal human experiments. Due to the continuous fermentation of social public opinion and the fueling of human rights organizations, Watson & Company was suddenly pushed to the forefront and faced the embarrassing situation of riding a tiger. It cannot be directly denied. After all, various graphic materials have been circulated, and there is no way to block the news, but if you admit it, you will immediately accept legal sanctions and everyone's verbal criticism. After the formal intervention of the Judicial Department, Marcus had no choice but to abandon his car and save Shuai. He handed over the scientific research director and other insignificant people in the laboratory, claiming that Watson had nothing to do with these human experiments and illegal detention. As far as we know, everything was done privately by scientific research directors who were hostile to mutants. Whether the citizens believed this reason or not, at least the judicial officers who conducted the investigation believed it. In this way, a huge crisis that was enough to defeat Watsonton was resolved and eliminated under Marcus's operation. Although he paid a lot of money, contacted various forces, and made promises of huge benefits, no matter what, the ship Watson still survived in the rough waves. Who is behind this? Marcus's eyes were sinister, like an enraged hungry wolf, with a heart-stopping ferocious light. He mobilized his strength to investigate, but the opponent's hands and feet were clean and left no traces that could be traced. Even if the hacker team traced the anonymous information on the network, they found nothing, just like a non-existent ghost above Watson's head. Wander. This allowed Marcus to dispel his doubts about Osborne Industries and Umbrella. Those two immature little guys were far from achieving this level. Looking at the crowd holding various signs and protesting loudly downstairs, Marcus couldn't help but smile contemptuously. A person as small as an ant still wants to make his own voice. Who cares about the accusations and criticisms of humble people? When the limelight passes, everyone will naturally forget about Watsonton's scandal. At that time, they will launch several free donation activities to public hospitals, or donate funds and equipment to nursing homes or disease control centers for free. At that time, everyone praises Watson for his good deeds. As for the bloody crimes he had committed, they were just stupid actions by a scientific research director who was driven by profit and blinded by hatred, and had nothing to do with Watson Company. The only pity is that we can only postpone the plan to suppress Osborne Industries and Umbrella, and sit back and watch them slowly occupy the market and start to grow and develop. Marcus couldn't help but shook his head and sighed. He had originally prepared a series of thunderous methods, but unfortunately, Senator Kelly turned out to be a mutant for some unknown reason, and the information and data within the laboratory were also stolen at the same time. On the internet, it caused a frenzy of public opinion. The two events happened so coincidentally that it almost felt like a script that had been planned long ago. As long as the giant Watsonon does not fall, no matter how hard Osborne and Umbrella struggle, they will not be able to escape being cannibalized by the predators at the top of the industry. Through the glass window, he vaguely saw the huge billboard, which was broadcasting industry news about Osborne Industries and Umbrella. The shy black-haired young man appeared in it, with a gentle and friendly smile on Marcus's face. It seems to be both hypocritical and disgusting, even more disgusting than Tony Stark's arrogant face. I don't believe you can always be so complacent. This time it's just good luck. Someone is targeting Watson. Soon I will mobilize resources and crush you and your shabby laboratory completely. Marcus said angrily that ever since he set his sights on this emerging scientific research institution, he seemed to have had bad luck. He originally teamed up with Senator Kelly to take down Osborne Industries in one fell swoop, but at this time, the other party was exposed. The identity and status of mutants have plummeted, and various conspiracy theories are rampant. As for Stryker, he finally obtained the genetic data of the mutants, but as a result, the experimental data was stolen, and Watson almost fell into despair. It was as if there was some divine will in the dark, which made Marcus wonder if that young boy was the mistress of Lady Luck. Otherwise, why would he encounter a heavy blow every time he wanted to take action? Chairman, Colonel William Stryker's phone number. The secretary stood outside and knocked on the door. Thinking of the complaints and questions that were about to come, Marcus felt a little headache. In order to divert attention, he pushed the scientific research director out to be a scapegoat. At the same time, several mutants obtained from Stryker were also confiscated and taken away by the Judicial Department. Human living bodies, as well as some data from anatomical studies. Obviously, the colonel called at this time with the purpose of raising an army to investigate. After hesitating for a moment, the old man in charge of Watsonton answered the call. It was not the right time to break up with Stryker. If he wanted to continue the research on mutant inhibitory drugs, he still needed the cooperation and help of the other party. Hello, Mr. Colonel. Please believe in Watsonton's guarantee that all this will never be involved in your head. I handled the matter very cleanly. Of course, partners should trust each other. Regarding Kelly's participation, I am deeply sorry for the unfortunate experience of the congressman. Don't worry, Colonel Stryker, you will receive Watsonton's sincerity soon. Marcus held back his impatience and spoke to Stryker on the phone with a smile. This cold and solemn colonel only wanted to benefit from Watson, but he was stingy about his own efforts. If it hadn't been for the development of mutant inhibitory drugs and the temporary need for Stryker's help, Marcus would have turned against him and taken all the results of the other party by force. He was just an army colonel, not a big shot. During the conversation, Marcus inadvertently looked out the window. The afterglow of the sunset had faded, the warm light sank into the horizon, and the gauze of night quietly draped over the city. However, this ordinary scene is filled with a disharmonious figure. An old man wearing a helmet and purple robe stood in the void, with his hands spread out, as if controlling the movement of the earth. As if everything had lost gravity, cars floated in the air, forming a spectacular long steel queue. The old man, who was as proud as a king, walked towards Watson step by step on the steps made of steel and metal. The phone in his hand suddenly dropped. Marcus opened his mouth wide, his eyes were full of horror, and a cold feeling swept through his body. Time goes back 10 minutes. At 6:30 in the afternoon, during the rush hour after get-off work, the traffic in this international metropolis is constantly passing through. The streets are filled with the sound of sharp horns, and the cars are like water droplets flowing into the river, driving on the congested highway. Peter was riding his newly purchased electric bike, holding a bouquet of delicate roses in his hand, and stopped at an intersection waiting for a red light. The young Spider-Man seemed to be in good times lately. Since the last time he took a photo of Senator Kelly, he also obtained key evidence of Watsonton's illegal human experiments from his old classmate Sean, which enabled the Daily Bugle to always publish eye-catching and explosive reports. Even the mean and stingy boss James rarely expressed praise. He also said that if Peter could continue, he would soon become a regular employee of the Daily Bugle. It happened that this gossip tabloid still lacked a chief photographer. Peter, who was in a difficult financial situation, felt like he had been given a shot in the arm when he heard this promise. He encouraged himself every day, hoping to get that formal position and no longer rely on a meager salary to pay rent and live. Lowering his head and smelling the fragrant scent of the roses, Peter couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. This was a surprise for Mary Jane. Today she would perform on stage for the first time in her life in a small theater. Peter, who is not good at creating a romantic atmosphere, deliberately booked a Michelin 3-star French restaurant in advance at Gwen's reminder and prepared to have a wonderful candlelight dinner in order to win the joy and cheers of the goddess in his dreams. Full of longing, Peter found his beloved little sheep suddenly shaking, as if being pulled by an invisible force, breaking away from his control, floating and flying out of thin air. What's going on? Wait. My new car. Before Peter could finish speaking, he heard shouts one after another, like the waves rolling. The brand new little sheep he just bought seemed to be controlled by an invisible big hand, automatically disintegrating in the air and turning into countless pieces of metal. Debris floated upward. It was not just Peter who encountered this strange thing, but all the vehicles parked at the intersection were like this. The young Spider-Man watched with his own eyes a car next to him. In just a few seconds, the body of the car disintegrated into pieces. Wrapped in the floating chassis and engine, they flew into the sky together, leaving only the car owner holding the steering wheel and looking blankly at the car leaving the ground. Peter had no time to take care of his beloved little sheep who had been brutally dismembered. He looked up at the metal wave in the sky, which was like a raging storm, flying in a certain direction. A looming figure stood in the air, and there were metal steps in front of him. The opponent's feet were generated out of thin air, and the opponent appeared in such a sensational way. Mutants, Peter thought to himself as he subconsciously raised the camera. The streets were like boiling oil cauldrons. People abandoned their cars and fled, screaming incessantly. Panic spread like a wave. Peter glanced at the delicate rose in his hand and couldn't help but sigh in frustration. It seemed that he was going to miss the date again this time. Thinking of Mary Jane questioning him angrily, he had a headache. The metal tornado was whirling and whistling in the sky. Magneto was wearing a helmet and his purple robes were flying. His majestic face showed a chilling chill. He was walking on the metal stairs in the air, like an arrogant king. The mighty metal frenzy is like its own subjects, obeying the call. Magneto opened his hands, as if waving an invisible baton, and the cars in the entire block flew into the sky like a long queue. Even the street lights and trash cans on the street were not spared. Almost all objects with metal properties were affected. The control and pull of this force disintegrated and scattered, and merged into the tornado storm that blocked the sky and the sun. Looking down at the tiny figures running around in panic, Magneto couldn't help but smile coldly in his heart. This world belongs to the pioneers who are at the forefront of evolution. Ordinary people with no power can only rely on the might of the strong. Shivering and pathetically asking for help. Looking at the Watson building standing in the center of the city, Magneto looked solemn. He originally planned to attack Liberty Island and transform the dignitaries from various countries who came to attend the high-end heads of state summit into mutants in one fell swoop, hoping to change the world structure and let his compatriots have a new and free future. But Watson's secret use of mutants for human experiments completely angered the mutant leader. Those bloody and cruel photos made him recall the dark past buried deep in his heart, and he was locked up in a cold and damp concentration camp. People continued to die every day, and painful memories that have faded into old photos suddenly emerge clearly. Later, Mystique Raven also suggested that if you want to declare the power of mutants to the world, you might as well go to Watsonton and attack the political leaders of various countries on Liberty Island. This will only make the situation of your compatriots worse, and even provoke the human world. Once a full-scale war is launched, the situation will never be restored. After careful consideration, Magneto finally accepted the proposal. Although the mutants had outstanding talents, they split into two camps, like a piece of loose sand, unable to directly confront the deeply rooted and powerful human government. At this point, even as proud as Magneto, he has to admit that it is really difficult for mutants to overthrow the rule of mankind with their own strength, unless his old friend Charles is willing to stand on his side and no longer hold the ridiculously stubborn idea of peace. While his thoughts were racing, the mutant leader raised his hand, and the floor-to-ceiling windows at the top of the Watsonton building shattered. Glass fragments fell like raindrops. Magneto stepped on the metal stairs and walked straight into the building's owner, Marcus Watsonton's office. The usually dignified Captain Watson tried his best to maintain his demeanor, but the intense panic in his eyes betrayed his mood at this time. "You were the one who used my compatriots to carry out those inhuman and bloody experiments." Magneto's voice was high and his eyes were sharp. He looked at Marcus Watson, who was full of fear. He couldn't help but think of the Nazi officers in the concentration camp. The dark past and painful memories surged like a tide, breaking through the memories in his mind. Gate. "It is precisely because of people like you that I will lead the Brotherhood on a completely different path from Charles." Magneto moved his fingers slightly, and the floating metal turned into a strong noose, wrapping it around Marcus's neck. Watsonton's helmsman kept struggling and retreating, but to no avail. From today on, the world will no longer ignore the voices of mutants. Everyone will know that we are not weak and powerless lambs. If humans want war, mutants will definitely rise up to resist. Magneto shouted sternly. He strode out of Watsonton and stood in the void. The floating and surging metal frenzy was controlled by the invisible hand, as if candles melted by the high temperature, condensed into a huge steel. The cross smashed deeply into the ground with a loud bang, causing fine cracks to appear on the concrete pavement. Magneto, who had created a big scene, stood on the top of the cross, waving his arms. Marcus, who was tied up with a metal noose, shouted for help. Unfortunately, the police who arrived did not dare to act rashly, but pointed their guns at the majestic figure, silhouette. Magneto stood on a steel cross inserted into the earth. Marcus Watson was suspended in the air by a metal noose, his legs kicking constantly, trying to break free from the tight shackles. Feeling the gazes of everyone below, Marcus, who was hanging in midair, felt particularly humiliated. He was born in a famous family since childhood and received an elite education from the upper class. At the age of 30, he officially took charge of the family business and became a success at the top of the country's pyramid, one of those. Compared to other peers who were still struggling at the starting line, Marcus had already stood at the finish line earlier, looking down at them from a higher position. The people he interacted with and talked to were either promising political figures or chaebol groups. Being at the helm of the company and living in a high position for a long time has allowed this old man, who is nearly 50 years old, to develop a strong demeanor and a dignified manner. But the calm demeanor of the person in power has now been destroyed by the mutant. Like a thief in the Middle Ages, he was hung on a heavy and huge steel cross, as if waiting for the judge to judge the crime at any time. With his purple robe flying in the wind, Magneto looked down at the heavily surrounded police cars and the special forces who arrived after receiving the rescue signal. His eyes were not afraid at all, but full of contempt. Useless humans and weapons, he snorted, raising his hand slightly. All the firearms in the policeman's hand flew out, then turned around and pointed at the former holder. Looking at the black muzzle of the gun, everyone was frightened and did not dare to act rashly for fear of accidentally making a move. The bullet will rush out of the gun chamber and take away his life. Did you see it? The reason why you reject us and hate us is just because mutants are better than humans. You are afraid of being taken away from the supreme power to dominate this planet. Look at these people. When they hold a gun, they think they have a sense of security, but when they find that the gun has lost its original function, they start to panic and be afraid. Through the micro speaker on the collar, Magneto's voice resounded throughout the world, like a loud and thick horn sound, shaking everyone's will. The law of nature is natural selection and survival of the fittest. This world will always belong to those pioneers who were at the forefront of evolution. This planet was first occupied by primitive bacteria, then covered by lower plants, and later relatively advanced coniferous plants, then seed plants, from marine life to land, then to the long-extinct dinosaurs, and finally to humans who evolved from ancient apes. Magneto changed his past proud and domineering image, and instead delivered an impassioned speech like a scholar. He had long been looking forward to a sensational official appearance, which would make mutants hiding in human society flock to the Brotherhood. In my arms, this manuscript written in advance is enough to win more support from my compatriots. After years of struggle and confrontation with his friend Charles, he finally figured out that only by taking the lead in unifying the mutants who had split into different camps could it be possible to overthrow human rule and build a beautiful home of his own. The reason why humans are able to dominate this beautiful planet is precisely because they can always adapt to harsh environments and complete their own evolution through learning and change. As the times progress, nuclear dust spreads all over the planet, and a new race born among humans, you call them mutants, an excellent race that possesses innate abilities because of genetic mutations. Many news media rushed to faithfully record this scene and broadcast it to thousands of TV sets in the form of a live broadcast. Magneto was even more proud after seeing it. This was exactly his purpose. The mutants had already gone into hiding. Tibet has been suffering for too long. It is time for a strong leader to rise up and lead his compatriots towards a better future. Charles only wants to be a bright beacon guiding mutants in the direction, but the suffering compatriots need a firm-willed and fearless iron-blooded leader to lead the mutants on the thorny road to freedom. He is not like someone who comes from a wealthy family. He is a good friend, and his heart always favors the side of humans. When dealing with humans who are hostile to mutants, Magneto will never be merciful. Compatriots, from today on, you no longer need to hide here and there and endure the strange eyes of others. Mutants are not freaks or deformities. We are better evolvers. Abandon your inner hesitation and return to the world. Come join the ranks of your compatriots. There will be no oasis of freedom and justice in this world. Those humans will only send you to the operating table, dissect your body with a cold scalpel, or lock you in an iron cage and treat you as a spectator, and playthings for entertainment. A better future will not come out of thin air. If we want to carve out the stone of hope from the mountain of despair, if we want the valley to rise, the mountain to fall, and the bumpy and tortuous road to become a smooth road, all of these need to be fought for by ourselves, and we must strive for it ourselves. The talents and abilities that come from here will be revealed. Let humans understand how powerful mutants are, and let them know that every time they capture a mutant, they will pay a heavy price thousands of times. Magneto's declaration spread throughout North America through invisible radio waves. Far away in Xavier Academy for Gifted Youth in Westchester, a bald old man sitting in a wheelchair stared at the high-spirited figure on the TV and couldn't help but wonder. Somewhat regretfully, since the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, he and Eric have gone to opposite camps. Obviously both of them are fighting for the future of their compatriots, but because of their different ideas, they have become rivals. The Brotherhood led by Magneto has attracted many radicals who have extreme ideas or have been persecuted, while the Academy led by the Professor wants to help fellow mutants who are suffering. The two sides hold different positions, and conflicts and disputes often occur. As the leader of the moderate faction, the Professor has been carefully maintaining the fragile peace between mutants and humans. Eric's goal is to establish a mutant nation, and it is a utopia in which two races coexist harmoniously. Professor. A graceful red-haired girl came over. Her name was Chin Gray, and she was one of the students of the bald old man. Let's go to Manhattan. The old man in the wheelchair sighed. He could not let Eric continue. The situation of mutants has always been difficult. If the human government reacts excessively at this time, it may lead to worse consequences. Moreover, Eric's inflammatory declaration will inevitably attract a group of mutants to join the Brotherhood. After growing in power, Magneto will probably intensify his efforts to develop the team. At that time, he will become the only obstacle to his friend's unification of the mutants. Pushing the wheelchair forward, the fierce declaration on the TV screen continued. Quote, "There is no tolerance and no peace in this world, and it is the same everywhere. Those in power wantonly harm vulnerable ethnic groups, and mutants can no longer remain silent. Today, I will execute God's righteous judgment." Magneto turned his head and looked at Mystique and his group coming out of the Watson building. He waved his arms heavily, as if receiving some kind of induction. Inside the skyscraper standing in the center of Manhattan, there was a loud noise and a surge. Waves of air rushed out along with smoke and dust, and the glass windows of the entire building shattered. Amidst the astonishing explosions, the solid building shook like a mountain toppling. Countless bricks and rubble fell like a torrential rain, and a plume of thick smoke rose into the sky. Like a steel giant standing tall in the Watson building in Manhattan, it seemed as if the mountain collapsed and collapsed. Large pieces of reinforced concrete fell with billowing smoke and dust, and hit the cars parked below heavily. The metal roof of the car was immediately crushed into waste iron. Intense flames erupted from the inside of the building, and people fled from the building one after another, like a panicked ant colony. The innocent people trapped in the floors by the spreading fire screamed for help desperately, trying to get help from others. The combustible materials in the building were detonated, and there were several loud bangs in succession. Bricks, sand, gravel and glass fragments rained down from the sky like raindrops. People cried and screamed. It was like the end of the world was coming. The scene was extremely chaotic for a while. When everyone was in despair, a flexible figure wearing a red tights quickly walked between more and more falling objects, spitting out tough spider silk, using his extraordinary ability to save those trapped, of innocent people. Spider-Man. Many people recognize this as a good neighbor in New York who often fights criminals in Queens. However, with the recent return of Tony Stark and the escalation of public opinion on the mutant incident, New Yorkers have almost forgotten it. This warm-hearted masked hero. Spider-Man nimbly climbs and jumps between tall buildings, just like Tarzan, using his agile movements to save innocent people one after another. "Help me," a Watsonton employee shouted while standing on the edge of the collapsed building. Before he could escape, he was trapped in the floor that would collapse at any time. Hearing the cry for help, Spider-Man naturally would not turn a blind eye. He sprayed out strong spider silk from his hand and swung it in the air. He stretched out his hand to grab the other person. Unexpectedly, the man suddenly felt weightless, and the floor beneath his feet cracked. Open it, and instantly the whole body falls down. Spider-Man quickly shot out a thread of spider silk, which stuck to the opponent's body. At the same time, he punched away several pieces of falling steel and concrete, and rescued the shocked Watsonton employees. The strong fire was still spreading wantonly, like a devil dancing arrogantly, taking away fresh lives. Seeing several figures swallowed by the flames, the helpless Peter felt a little guilty and sad. He couldn't save everyone, so he could only watch the other person lose his life. Spider-Man, who was hanging in the air, felt an irresistible feeling of powerlessness in his heart. He seemed to have returned to the night when Uncle Ben was shot. No matter how hard he ran, he couldn't stop the bullet from being shot and taking away the few loved ones in this world. Glancing at Spider-Man, who was acting as a superhero to save the masses, Magneto withdrew his gaze indifferently. He was not a mutant, and he had no interest in paying attention to people with superpowers other than his compatriots. The members of the Brotherhood climbed up the metal stairs to the steel cross and stood behind Magneto. This was the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis that mutants had made such a grand appearance in front of the world. There was a burst of shutter sound, and the flash kept switching. The news reporter excitedly took pictures of suitable materials for tomorrow's headline page. This world is cruel. Only the strong are qualified to survive. Human beings are losers on the road of evolution. Mutants are the future. Along with Magneto's declaration, Marcus Watson, who was suspended in the air, was fixed on a steel cross standing on the ground. The capitalist, who vaguely felt that his life was threatened, shouted for help to the police and special forces below, but unfortunately there was no rescue. People can provide him with some help, and the guns floating in the air are aimed at the heads of these people. As long as the mutant standing above twitches his finger and gently fiddles with the magnetic thread, everyone present will have their heads exploded immediately. The scene of dozens of people having their heads exploded at the same time must be quite spectacular. No one will come to save you. They are afraid of me, just like they usually fear your money and power. Magneto said calmly. He moved his fingers slightly, and many sharp spikes suddenly sprouted from the steel cross. The cold metal tore through the skin and flesh. The severe pain made Marcus howl miserably. How could the pampered Watsonton helmsman have ever suffered anything like this? Inhuman torture. This is a righteous judgment. This is how you treat my compatriots. You tie them to the operating table, use a scalpel to dissect their bodies, or take blood in sections, make living specimens, and perform various cruel experiments. Your behavior reminds me of bad memories from the past, and those officers also treated me this way. Hearing the cold words full of murderous intent, Marcus defended with a trembling voice. No, you misunderstood, I just want to help you. Eliminate the stubborn curse in your body and let you return to a normal life. Ha! Magneto sneered and said contemptuously, mutants don't need anyone to cure them. We are a better evolved race, far better than the advanced existences of humans. He opened his hand, and the sharp spikes shining with cold light were like long nails piercing Marcus's body. Blood flowed down along the steel cross, the scarlet color mixed with the coldness of the metal, adding to the shape of the upper body is like the crucifixion of Jesus, revealing a kind of religious cruel beauty. As Marcus screamed in agony and became weaker, Magneto completed this so-called just trial. The faces of the police who were supposed to protect the safety of citizens turned red, and the blood of anger rushed to their brains. Mutants. What kind of skill does it count to hurt an old man who has no ability to resist? The new commissioner of the New York Police Department, George Stacy, stood up first. He grabbed the gun floating in the air and pointed it at Magneto, who stood on the steel cross. The mutants' arrogant and brutal methods stimulated the police and special forces who arrived. Previously, they were so frightened by the opponent's powerful capabilities that they did not dare to act rashly for fear of being shot in the head. But now that someone is taking the lead, they no longer hold the mentality of fear and fear. They look at the news media that are surrounding them. If they don't do something, I am afraid that tomorrow all the newspapers will accuse the New York Police Department of being incompetent and cowardly. When you massacred my compatriots, why didn't you think that they were also innocent victims? Magneto smiled contemptuously, and suddenly relaxed his control over the firearms, allowing the police to take back their guns. The performance was coming to an end, and it was time for a successful curtain call. The police who got the firearms seemed to feel a little more secure. They looked at the arrogant mutants standing on high places. Those guys were like looking down at tiny ants with a dismissive attitude, as if they were surrounded by countless people in this area. 10 police cars and special forces reinforcements are not worth mentioning at all. A policeman, blinded by rage, pulled the trigger with trembling fingers. As the first gunshot erupted, other people who were frightened also opened fire, and metal bullets rained down on the steel cross. The mutants on top shot away. Magneto smiled proudly, as if he had expected it. He stretched out his hand slightly and released an invisible force. Hundreds of bullets were frozen in the air, as if they were blocked by a transparent wall. Those who take the lead in using violence will be punished with violence. The mutant leader snorted, and the metal bullets that could easily take away people's lives, like docile sheep, obeyed Magneto's orders and turned around, aiming at the astonished policeman. Today will be the beginning of a new future for mutants. Magneto shouted slogans, waved his arms heavily, and the firearms once again broke away from the police's hands, and then the bullets whizzed away towards their former owners like a rapid rain of bullets. The reporters holding cameras and the citizens sitting in front of the TV couldn't bear to close their eyes, shouting loudly in their hearts, "Who will stop this?" Dozens of police officers, as well as special forces who came for reinforcements, were about to be slaughtered by mutants without any resistance. However, no one could stop it. As a superhero, Spider-Man was saving the people trapped in Watsonton. The innocent citizens in the building, and judging from the powerful abilities displayed by the other party, even if Spider-Man arrives, he may not be a match for this evil mutant called Magneto. After a few seconds of silence, the expected bloody scene did not happen. The metal bullets that were fired were blocked, as if they were frozen in the air, unable to make any progress. Magneto noticed an invisible resistance blocking the bullets. He instantly thought of an old friend he hadn't seen for many years. As soon as a warning sign arose in his heart, a strong arm strangled his neck. The saber-toothed tiger Victor, who was not very bright, grabbed the Brotherhood leader's neck. With just a little force, he could break the old man's head. No matter how powerful Magneto is, in the final analysis, he is only a mortal body. He has lost his innate ability to manipulate magnetic fields and control metals. A bullet or even a dagger can take his life. When Mystique saw this, she immediately reacted, but before she could take action, Toad stared at her and said, "You'd better stay quiet, Raven. Eric, you have done enough today, let them go." Victor, the saber-toothed tiger, had empty eyes, as if his body had been taken over by another person. The situation was immediately reversed. Magneto, whose life was threatened, stood on the steel cross, glanced around, and shouted, "Charles, I know you are here, why don't you stand up and meet me?" In a black car at the intersection of the street, the bald old man had complicated eyes. He and Eric used to be good partners who fought side by side and trusted each other. In an era shrouded in the shadow of the Cold War, they together led the mutants who were in a period of confusion. Man, against an evil scientist intent on destroying the world. It's just that Eric couldn't let go of the hatred in his heart. He killed Sebastian Shaw, but at the same time he inherited his radical ideas in disguise. He felt that human beings were not trustworthy enough, so he was determined to establish a free country for mutants. "If you want to save them, you have to kill me first." Magneto showed no fear in his eyes. He held his head high and said, "Charles, haven't you given up on your innocent ideals yet? What's the point of rescuing these humans? They will pass the registration bill, put a mark on your forehead, and then monitor it as an alien or monster. As long as you dare to show your claws to them, there will be an endless prison life waiting for you." Charles was silent as he sat in the car. His old friend Eric was brutally persecuted by a Japanese military officer in his childhood, and later became Sebastian Shaw's experimental subject. His dark and painful experience made him he has always hated humans extremely. "It won't be like that. We can wait for peace to come." The words of admonishment came from the mouth of the saber-toothed tiger Victor. Magneto showed a sneer. He and Charles had been at odds with each other for decades in this endless debate. In the end, no one could convince the other and could only break up. "Okay, let's try it." The sound of bullets being loaded was heard one after another, and the firearms floating in the air seemed to be controlled by invisible hands. With a bang, the sound of gunshots echoed in the streets. A metal bullet stopped on the forehead of Police Chief George, just a little bit it can penetrate his head. The bald old man frowned and asked Chin to use his abilities to stop the metal bullet that was supposed to penetrate his head. The two forces faced each other like an invisible wrestling match. "How many people can you save? It's impossible to block all the bullets." Magneto's face was stern. He was never willing to compromise with anyone. "Besides, they won't thank you. Humans will only use you as a weapon against me. Charles, why do you always do things that don't get rewarded?" The huge force pushed the bullet, like a small sharp cone trying to drill into George's forehead. The new police chief let out a cry of pain. Charles hesitated, and finally closed his eyes helplessly, his mind being manipulated. "Victor, the saber-toothed tiger, and Todd, the toad, suddenly seemed to wake up from a dream, their eyes full of confusion, completely forgetting what had just happened. You are still too soft-hearted, this is your weakness. Magneto smiled disdainfully, waving his arms, and the metal guns floating in the air disintegrated automatically in an instant, turning into a pile of parts and falling to the ground. Magneto, who performed a perfect curtain call, controlled the magnetic field to drive the extremely heavy steel cross, and flew the Brotherhood and the others out of Manhattan. Marcus Watson, who had lost too much blood, was like a tattered bag, fell to the hard ground with a plop, and the eyes that once had infinite ambition have long become dim. A look of pain appeared on the professor's face. If he could be ruthless and control the saber-toothed tiger Victor to break Eric's neck, then all the disputes among the mutants would gradually be eliminated, just like if he was willing to stand by his old friend over there. Against human rule, mutants can easily gain a place in this world, but both sides will have to pay a heavy price. Looking at the professor who was struggling in her heart, Chin slowly lowered her head, a frightening light flashed in her amber eyes. She started the car and left this chaotic and noisy neighborhood. Sean, who had been secretly following the whole process through Skynet, closed his laptop and couldn't help but sigh in his heart at the different styles of the two mutant leaders. Magneto was majestic and domineering, while Professor Charles was gentle, kind, and soft-hearted. The two sides have been fighting each other for decades, and they can be described as a model of loving and killing each other. Fortunately, the two leaders have different positions, otherwise the human government may not be able to maintain the current stable situation. The most powerful mind controller in the world can easily control human beings' mental thinking and turn them into puppets that obey orders. Sean sighed softly. This was also the reason why he didn't want to come into contact with mutants for the time being. The obscure and invisible power of the mind was really hard to guard against. He couldn't pin his own safety on the moral standards of Professor Charles. Borrowing the sharp knife of mutants, Watson was eliminated neatly. I wonder if Erica had successfully obtained it from Pelican Island. When Magneto raided Watson building, he asked the new leader of the Hand to lead the elite troops attack the Watson laboratory in San Francisco. The mutant genes and data secretly hidden by Marcus were a rare and valuable asset. What's more, there is an excellent weapon against mutants, an antidote that can temporarily cure mutant genes, the little boy Jimmy. Whether it's Magneto or the professor, anyone who blocks his path will become an opposing enemy. Before you want to hunt wild animals, you must first prepare bear traps and shotguns, then set traps and wait for the right time. Be prepared. Sean stretched out. After dealing with Watson, he could enter a period of stable development. Coulson stepped into the branch established in New York. The huge eagle emblem reflected silver light. He looked at the lengthy name under the logo and wondered if he should suggest to the director to change it to a shorter and easier to remember title. The name of the Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency is really a bit convoluted. Hi, long time no see, John. Coulson greeted a middle-aged man with a smile. What a rare visitor, Phil. It seems that the mutant thing really caused a big fuss yesterday, otherwise Director Fury wouldn't have sent you here. Senior Agent John Garrett said with a hearty smile. This middle-aged man, who is strong and looks like a Western cowboy, is a top-level 8 agent. He joined the special agency established with the approval of the World Security Council at the same time as Coulson, and now serves as a manager of the New York branch. Yes, Magneto, who is on the most dangerous list, made his debut in a two-grand way. Moreover, during the high-end heads of state summit, a big shot died. The White House was extremely angry. Coulson smiled bitterly. The vacation he finally got was ruined. He originally planned to go to Provence for a vacation with his girlfriend, but now he can only postpone it for a while. We are already tracing the whereabouts of Eric Lancer. This leader of mutants has always been the target of our vigilance. However, they are too powerful and it is difficult for ordinary low-level agents to monitor them. As for Weiss, the Mutant Academy in Techester is even more difficult to control. All the agents conducting surveillance seem to have had their memories artificially deleted and cannot remember anything. Garrett shook his head helplessly. These extremely threatening mutant groups were not something ordinary people could contend with. They were born with powerful abilities, and unless they were specially trained senior agents, they would be difficult to deal with. Has the director's plan been approved? The middle-aged man, who looked like a rough man, asked casually. As one of the senior personnel, Garrett knew that the Black Director had a highly dangerous plan that specifically targeted more and more superpowers, but it was difficult to get approval from the World Security Council, so it was shelved for a long time. Coulson took a deep look at his old friend and said calmly, "This is not an issue that I should be concerned about. I hope that the group of mutants can calm down and at least allow me to have a peaceful holiday." He followed Garrett to the archives room where the information was stored. On the rows of shelves were intelligence information sent by various low-level agents. They were then classified according to different levels. Confidential information above level B would be sent to when you go to the headquarters, not even the backup will be left here. Coulson came to the New York branch this time just to retrieve some old files. These low-level documents were not recorded in the database, but were stored in paper form. This is all the files of Irella Lancel. This guy has repeatedly confronted the federal government, planned attacks, rescued imprisoned mutants, formed a brotherhood, and treated humans cruelly. Director Fury once specifically targeted. He has formulated a capture plan, but the opponent's ability is too strong, and even with the use of polymer weapons manufactured by Stark Industries, it will be difficult to capture him alive. Garrett pulled out a few documents and said, "And there are other mutants around Magneto. It is extremely difficult to carry out beheading operations or secret assassinations." Coulson nodded in agreement. Of course he understood how difficult these mutants were. Director Fury also had a headache about this. In the past, he used the moderate Professor Charles to contain Magneto's Brotherhood, but with yesterday's incident, vicious incidents have intensified the conflicts between the two parties. The White House has become wary of this special group hidden in society. However, Colonel Stryker, who had always maintained a stance against mutants, was a blessing in disguise. He received the attention of the White House and the military, and the research on mutants that had been put on hold began to be restarted. The White House needs Director Fury to come up with a defense strategy for mutants. Not only Magneto and his Brotherhood, but also Charles Xavier and his Mutant Academy, will all be listed as dangerous elements. Colonel Stryker, a mutant defense team has been established, and these materials will be compiled and will be handed over to him. Haha, it seems Mr. Colonel got what he wanted. Garrett smiled. He had also heard rumors that Stryker hated mutants. Coulson was sorting through the dusty files. He was not supposed to do this kind of thing. He could just find a low-level agent or support staff. He was just passing by and looking for an opportunity to visit his friends. Mutants are in trouble. The friendly senior agent shook his head. After putting the information files into the paper box, Coulson seemed to remember something, turned around and asked, "Are there any people in New York worthy of attention recently? Mutants are enough to give us a headache, don't mess with those street heroes." "What's going on?" Garrett frowned, thought about it carefully, and then replied, "Those guys have been surprisingly quiet recently. They started to fight against a Yakuza organization in Hell's Kitchen, and then disappeared. The Punisher and Daredevil, there is no trace of such characters at all, and the New York Police Department will probably open champagne to celebrate. It is rare for the chaotic area where gangs are rampant to have a calm day." Coulson was quite surprised. He had previously served as a manager of the New York branch, so he naturally knew that there was a group of people with extraordinary abilities hidden in this city. Director Fury had listed them as surveillance targets a long time ago and conducted simple keep daily records to ensure that the other party does not commit any terrorist incidents that endanger national security. For powerful characters like the Punisher and Daredevil, generally speaking, those field agents will only roughly determine their whereabouts, and will not interfere in their lives rashly, or make contact easily, otherwise it will easily arouse the other party's alert and resistance. In short, these dangerous elements who cannot be recruited or treated as objects of surveillance and vigilance. We all strictly follow Director Fury's orders, classify special events, and list some suspects as surveillance targets. Garrett smiled at Coulson. "But I think your classification is too detailed. We are a special agency that specializes in dealing with superpowers or irregular incidents. Why should we even deal with gang vendettas?" The senior agent, who looked as rough as a cowboy, had some complaints. He still remembered that half a year ago, a high school student knocked down a few gangsters. At the same time, the gangs where those gangsters belonged suffered a serious blow, and then a low-level rookie doing field work actually killed a man under 20. The student who was 6 years old was listed as a surveillance target, and the other person was not crossed off the list until the suspicion was completely eliminated. If this kind of thing spreads, even the FBI will laugh at them. After all, cases such as gang vendettas are matters that the New York Police Department should be responsible for investigating. It's not like that everywhere. This is New York. Of course we have to be cautious. Coulson comforted his friend. This special department with considerable hidden power has a meticulous and detailed hierarchical system, with various authority levels set up to ensure confidentiality and security within the department. Even Coulson himself cannot interfere with many things. Especially with the emergence of people with superpowers, their lives are no longer as easy as before. What they are dealing with as agents is no longer international terrorist organizations or private armed forces. They are facing more troublesome opponents. No wonder the director is so eager to pass that plan. Coulson thought in his heart. If you want to deal with a group of dangerous people, you have to recruit another group of more dangerous guys. Hudson River, New York Harbor. Harry got out of the car in a casual outfit, waved the driver back, and boarded the luxury yacht moored in the port. Master Osborne looked at the 5-story high sea castle with its huge size, and the imposing aura he exudes are enough to intimidate people. Walking onto the third deck, Harry could not help but click his tongue. Looking down from a high place, this private yacht was like a luxurious and huge palace on the sea. Not only was it spacious, it also had its own basketball court, movie hall and wine tasting room. Hundreds of people are not a problem. He lamented his friends spending a lot of money, and found Sean, a famous young genius in New York, lying on a bench in the sun. At this time, he was sunbathing in sunglasses, with fresh fruit next to him and a bottle in an ice bucket of whiskey. You should invite a bunch of Hollywood stars and throw a yacht party or something, so that tomorrow the newspapers will publish The Rich Life of New York Geniuses and let people in this city know that it's not just Tony Smith. Tucker is the guy who enjoys life. Harry chose a seat and sat down. The huge and luxurious yacht moved slowly. The moist sea breeze carried water vapor and hit his face. He looked up at the sky. The bright sunshine penetrated the clouds and several white seagulls passed by on the clear sea. There are a few white clouds floating in the clear blue sky. All this made Mr. Osborne, who was indulged in extravagance, feel a sense of relief, and his restless heart gradually calmed down. New York is like Vanity Fair. When you can bring benefits to them, others praise you to the sky. But if you are worthless and lose your value, they don't even bother to look at you. Sean smiled slightly, looked at Harry, and said softly, "People like us who chase fame and fortune should occasionally find a quiet place to relax." Harry thought thoughtfully and nodded. "Maybe you were right. Wealth sometimes does not give people a sense of security. I did not expect that the arrogant Watson would fall so easily." A week has passed since the mutant attack in Midtown Manhattan. The high-end heads of state summit originally scheduled to be held on Liberty Island has not been held as scheduled. Perhaps it is due to concerns about security issues and fear that the radical mutants will do something dangerous again. The White House had to cancel this World Summit that brought together dignitaries from various countries. The clamor for reactivating the Mutant Registration Act has become increasingly louder. Magneto, who made his debut by destroying Watsonton Tower, announced the existence of mutants to the world in a high-profile way, making the increasingly acute mutant problem now put aside. On the table, it attracted great attention from the White House and the military. In the words of Senator Kelly, who has disappeared, "We must never allow a group of dangerous elements to roam this country without any laws, discipline or control. Thank you mutants, at least we don't have to do anything to be the final beneficiaries." Sean said lightly. In fact, in this crisis, Colonel William Stryker was the biggest winner. But this is okay. Using the power of the federal government to deal with mutants can avoid direct conflicts, and it is best not to have to end up personally. After all, what he has to face is the most powerful group in the world, the mind of Professor Charles, abilities, Magneto's magnetic control, and a dark phoenix with unlimited potential. Before he was absolutely sure, Sean didn't want to collide directly with Professor Charles's Academy of Mutants and Magneto's Brotherhood. There were too many uncertain factors. It was best to let Stryker charge into the battle for him. Method. Osborne has successfully entered the market and has great prospects. Although it is impossible to temporarily replace Watson's position, there is no other force that can prevent us from slowly growing and developing our power. Harry was rather complacent. He thought about the ridiculous faces of the people on the board of directors, and he couldn't help feeling secretly happy. Before Watson launched the offensive, it had already made the outside world unanimously look down on it. Even within the company, people's hearts were floating, and almost no one is optimistic about Osborn's future. But no one expected that mutants would suddenly attack Watson. Not only did they destroy the corporate building, but also the leader of this huge empire was unfortunately killed. As a family business, Marcus Watson's son was exposed again. The true identity of the mutant surprised all the forces who wanted to carve up Watsonton, and easily kicked the poor young man out. As for the next step, it's how to share the rich cake and how to change Watson's appearance and regain his life. In this carnival of capital, Osborn acted as a bystander, but did not beat up the drowned dog. For Harry and Sean, the obstacles in the way have been cleared, and they only need to digest the huge medical market. Slowly withdraw funds to continue the next stage of research and development work. With the loss of Watsonton as the leader, Osborn should formulate a new order. After those capital groups have finished carving up, we will start a new round of shuffling. Sean said calmly, as if he was the one in control of Osborn, but Harry was not dissatisfied. The reason why this company named after the family name has been able to survive several difficulties in succession is almost entirely due to the help of the other party. He was sincerely grateful for this, and the previous vigilance and precautions had long been forgotten. The greatest advantage of this young Master Osborn is probably that he is very self-aware. He knows that he is isolated and helpless in the board of directors. Except for those business brokers with evil intentions, no one will be willing to devote all their efforts to help a rich man with mediocre abilities, so he could only believe in Sean, and in fact, his friend did not disappoint him. I want to enjoy a quiet vacation, and I will leave all the laboratory matters to Dr. Connors. Sean stretched his body lazily. He became more and more addicted to the feeling of absorbing energy. There seemed to be a black hole hidden in his body, constantly absorbing all kinds of energy. As his thoughts sank in, golden light surged forward, like a small sun. Sean inexplicably felt that there was an invisible door to the void hidden in this transformed and strengthened body, connecting to another inexorable body. In the dimensional world of knowledge, there seemed to be a voice constantly urging him to absorb more energy and then open the invisible door. I heard that Umbrella has also reached a cooperation with the Doom Group. Harry asked curiously as he took the whiskey from the ice bucket. Victor Doom is also a well-known genius. Compared with his old classmate Reed Richards, this somewhat arrogant and conceited man has established himself on Wall Street at a young age and has made huge achievements. With a net worth, he was once a prominent figure in New York newspapers. It's just a private collaboration, Sean said softly. It seemed good to be able to witness the birth of the Fantastic Four and Dr. Doom. He looked up at the clear sky filled with white clouds, vaguely looking forward to this space trip. Can the violent cosmic energy allow him to open the door containing unknown variables in his body? Feeling the light of the stars, Sean had a smile on his lips. He wanted to be the sun of this world and led mankind towards the sea of stars. In the Baxter building, Sean looked at the angry Mindy with a headache. The little Lolita had been quite resentful of him recently. As their careers started to take off and their work became increasingly busy, their lives were no longer as relaxed and leisurely as before. Sean, you have changed. Mindy pouted. She was nestled on the sofa, holding a pillow of Peppa Pig's doll in her hand. I have been eating pizza takeout for a long time. Do you know if you have been eating this for a long time? Growing high-calorie foods will make me gain weight. Sean looked at the ice cream box she had just finished in silence, ignoring the little Lolita's complaints. Today he had to prepare to board the spaceship to space with the future Fantastic Four. After a short vacation, he finished handling the trivial matters at hand and handed over all the work within the laboratory to Dr. Connors. Erica returned successfully from San Francisco and brought back the mutant's deadly nemesis, Jimmy, a 12-year-old boy. His serum can develop drugs that suppress mutant genes. The most interesting thing is that this little boy himself is a mutant. As an unexpected gain from this trip, he also obtained a lot of genetic data of mutants, which allowed Sean to know more about this special group, and it was no longer limited to the memories in his mind. Take good care of your home. When I come out from outer space, I will bring you, Well, apart from the debris and garbage floating in the universe, I don't seem to be able to bring you any memorable gifts. Sean touched the little loli's head. Of course he knew that the reason why Mindy was angry was actually because he was worried about his own safety. After all, this was not a sightseeing trip. He went to outer space to collect data and information about the energy of the universe. This kind of thing just sounded like as for something very dangerous. There is indeed reason to worry. I have lost my last relative, so you can't leave me behind. Mindy pursed her lips and said nothing more willfully. She gently stood on tiptoes and held Sean's waist with both hands. It was rare to see a little loli being so serious. Sean couldn't help but feel funny, and felt a little warm in his heart. It was a happy thing to have someone in this world who cared about you. Sean, without you, who will help me cook and wash the dishes in the future, and give me a lot of pocket money. Hearing Mindy whispering, Sean was slightly moved and immediately carried the little loli back to the sofa. On the days when I'm not here, cook and wash the dishes by yourself. You're not allowed to order takeout. You always eat some junk food and see how fat you become. Sean, who turned into a strict parent, taught him a lesson. Didn't the etiquette teacher in school teach you to be a delicate little lady? Look at your chubby face and belly. How will you get married in the future? Sean babbled and poked the little loli's face with his fingers from time to time. Well, it felt pretty good. He completely ignored the annoyed expression on the other person's face, which looked like a kitten with fried hair. Bang bang bang. After waving the pillow and giving it a crackling beating, with a triumphant smile, Mindy looked like a general returning in triumph and walked back to the room with her head held high. Sean rubbed his face and sighed secretly. It's not easy to raise a violent little loli these days. NASA, Spacecraft Launch Base. Sean wore a safety helmet and met with Reed and Ben. During this period, he met Victor Doom, the investor of this space trip. As the newspaper said, this man's eyes were as sharp as an eagle. He is a tall man with a rather arrogant temperament and is very aggressive. He will show his arrogance from time to time. This kind of arrogance that is revealed without experience seems to be more annoying than Tony Stark's arrogance and narcissism. At least Reed and Ben don't have a good face. However, Victor's attitude towards Sean was very enthusiastic. Apparently this young and promising entrepreneur had also heard of the reputation of New York genius. After removing the stumbling block of Watsonton, Osborne and Anne Brera's development momentum is extremely rapid, like a rising star, full of vitality and vitality. Doom, who always only has interests in his eyes, will of course show his favor to Sean. The other person is not a failed scientist like Reed. He has a smart brain, but cannot play a real role. He only immerses himself in useless research and ignores the most important thing. Important capital accumulation. After a few lukewarm greetings, Sean walked outside and heard the fierce argument between Reed and Ben. It can't be done. Absolutely not. He saw the kind-hearted Ben shaking his head. External rocket launcher, orbital system engine, just like any spaceship you've flown before. Reed shrugged. Ben, who has always been good-tempered, spoke fiercely. He pointed to a rider riding a Harley-Davidson motorcycle on the road in the distance and said loudly, "I will not be the deputy of that stupid boy who was kicked out by the Aeronautics and Space Administration. Guy, he actually smuggled 2 underwear models into the simulated cockpit, and then had fun with women in there." Reed twitched his lips. Of course he knew the character of Susan's unassuming brother, but the other party was the designated pilot of the Doom group, and Ben was the deputy. If there was a conflict between these two people, then the trip to space would undoubtedly be in trouble. To put it aside. After some arguments, the kind-hearted Ben couldn't resist Reed's request, and angrily returned to the base to make preparations. He didn't want to see that arrogant and ignorant. Sean returns to the base. As an accompanying member, he needs to undergo a simple physical test. 6 hours later, the lift-off procedure will begin. Synthetic materials are like a second layer of skin that can adapt to each person's physical needs. Miss Storm, a genetic research director, walked gracefully in a close-fitting blue uniform. Doom's current girlfriend handed Sean the specially made blue uniform and gave him a slight smile. Reed, who was sitting on the sofa, immediately stood up and turned his attention away from the documents and put it on Susan. He asked in surprise, "Wow, this is really great." Looking at Reed walking towards her, Susan smiled with satisfaction. The close-fitting uniform outlined her confident body curves, slightly revealing a line of snow-white skin and her plump breasts, which was enough to make any man unable to take his eyes away. It's made of self-regulating unstable molecules. I've been studying the molecular formula of this thing. Reed took the uniform and started talking, completely ignoring the hot Susan. Even Sean on the side couldn't help but sigh. This future Mr. Miracle is indeed single due to his own strength. No wonder the invisible woman who is called a beauty would leave him. This kind of man who is incomprehensible and charming is really too impressive. A sense of frustration. Well, you are indeed a genius from Columbia University, Susan said without any expression, threw her uniform to the other party, then turned and left. Seeing Reed's confused expression, even his good friend Ben couldn't help but turn around. If this famous genius could use half of his talent in scientific research to chase girls, where would Susan be? Will fall into the arms of that Victor Doom. After waiting quietly, as the boarding notice came over the radio, everyone boarded the spaceship that was about to fly to space. 6 hours later, Sean was in the dark and boundless universe. Through the protective cover of the space station, he looked at the blue planet in the distance. It was like a dazzling gem, exuding magnificent and astonishing beauty, brilliance. This beautiful planet that has given birth to countless living beings is like the most precious treasure in the treasure house of the gods. It makes people reluctant to take their eyes away. Reed and the others walking behind also stopped and watched ordinary people review their lives. A spectacular sight that may not be visible. This is the fascinating part of the universe, like a puzzle that can never be solved. Sean sighed sincerely. He came to this world not just to conquer or plunder. If we can create a new future in this new era where superheroes are born, let mankind break away from the shackles of the earth, abandon the previous social system, move towards the boundless sea of stars, and leap to a higher level of civilization, isn't it more fulfilling than ruling the world? A man with great power and unrivaled power, what can he bring to this world? Is he like Superman, becoming a beacon in people's hearts, bringing hope and light, or is he like a cold tyrant, demanding unscrupulously, turning the beautiful world into ruins, sitting alone on the throne at the top of the world, feeling the fear and curses of everyone? Sean thought he could try another interesting way, using money and power to gain more say, establish unshakable status and influence, and use his personal will to influence the operation of the world. He wanted to be someone that humans look up to. The only sun not only exudes the warm light that makes people yearn for, but also reveals the inaccessible scorching heat. Isn't this different from the feeling you had at the Halton Planetarium? Susan walked past Reed and said calmly. The beautiful and lively Miss Storm, like a proud white swan, passed by Reed. She was obviously still worried about her ex-boyfriend's previous neglectful behavior. This talented scientist from Columbia University was good at everything, but he is like a piece of wood, completely ignorant of style. Only when talking about scientific research can he show off his style with eloquence. She fell in love with Reed in the first place, perhaps because of this sense of admiration. However, after getting in touch with him, she found that he was a bit dull and boring, and once she immersed herself in research for several months, she did not care about her own feelings. It would be perfect if he could harmonize with Victor's character, Susan thought to herself. One was indecisive, dull, the other was frivolous, manic, and had a high self-esteem. This made Susan feel troubled. Out of the corner of her eyes, she accidentally caught sight of Sean, who was chatting happily with Victor. He was also a famous genius. Hailed as a promising new scientific star, he is gentler and funnier than the former, and more calm and restrained than the latter. Just like Walden Pond in Thoreau's works, the surface is clear, but the inside reveals an indescribable mystery. Explore the deep silence at the bottom. We can monitor the approach of the clouds from here and conduct observation tests, Susan said, abandoning the messy thoughts in her mind. According to Reed's calculation model, the cosmic energy storm will pass through the space station in 9 hours. At that time, it will be the best time to collect data, and now it is time to make all preparations. I have to borrow Susan for a while, I hope you can understand. Doom glanced at his old classmates intentionally or unintentionally, with a winner's smile on his face. Reed's reappearance made the young and promising Doom wary. Susan had always maintained an ambiguous attitude towards him. Although the two were boyfriend and girlfriend, their relationship had not made substantial progress. With his own diligence and hard work, Doom came to the international metropolis of New York from Latvia, a remote and backward country in Eastern Europe. During his short college career, he was ridiculed by his classmates because of his humble background. At that time, Reed was a popular genius in the school, and people cheered and applauded wherever he went. After graduation, relying on his outstanding mind and good business methods, Doom quickly accumulated wealth through research and development of technology, and finally gained a foothold on Wall Street and established his own business empire. At this time, Reed Richards, a famous genius scientist, is still running around for research funds. Susan Storm, a beautiful and lovely girl who was once out of reach, with a good background, also abandoned Reed, an idealist who was immersed in the dream of changing the world all day long, and instead let him find someone close to him. Chance. Victor Doom feels that these days are simply the happiest time in his life. He used to be regarded as an unsurpassable object, but now he is humbled to create profits for himself, and the muse that he longs for seems to be invested in him. He thought of relying on Reed's research results to earn more substantial benefits, and then successfully embraced the beauty. Such a beautiful vision made Doom feel happy. He even felt that he had accomplished everything he had pursued in the first half of his life. Wealth, fame and fortune, and the woman he loved were all at his fingertips. Don't disturb your world. Sean put his arm around Reed's shoulders and turned to walk outside. Mr. Magic's eyes were full of bitterness and helplessness. Watching his favorite girlfriend fall into the arms of someone else really made him feel a little uncomfortable. There are still 7 hours left, and the cosmic energy storm is about to arrive. Ben puts on his spacesuit, carries the prepared plant seedlings, and conducts inspections before leaving the cabin. Of all the people, this big guy is responsible for the most dangerous job. He needs to leave the spacecraft and go outside to place plant seedlings to face the impact of the cosmic energy storm and see if those violent ray flows can change the genes inside the plants. Finally, let Sean and Susan finish drawing the map. The frustrated Reed returned to the cabin and continued to calculate and test the data model of cosmic energy, while Johnny, who had escaped from frivolity, was helping Ben put on the bulky space suit. "It's best for your good partner to stay away from my sister," Johnny reminded. He never appreciated Reed's dullness. It's good that he keeps company with great scientific undertakings all his life. There is no need. The nourishment of love. Maybe Susan hasn't let go of that feeling. Before Ben could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Johnny with a sneer. "Wow. Let's think about it seriously. On one side is Victor, who is super rich and the best actor this year. On the other side is Reed, the stupidest person in the world. A smart person, worth less than a stamp. Well, what an embarrassing choice." Ignoring the two people arguing, Sean walked alone to the observation deck. He looked at the silent and endless dark universe, and the energy in his body was faintly pulsing, surging like a boiling tide. "Let the storm come more violently," he murmured softly, looking forward to the arrival of the huge wave of energy from the depths of darkness. In the main control center of the space station, Doom's handsome face was full of tenderness. His hands were placed behind his back, as if he had prepared some surprising and mysterious gift. Doom quietly removed the isolation board, and the transparent protective shields in all directions suddenly reflected a soft light. Susan covered her mouth in surprise and looked at the blue planet, mountains and rivers, and the vast continent under her feet. Looking down from here, it was spectacular and majestic. The scene looked very small, and the whole world was shrunk 1,000 times, appearing in the eyes, as if they were gods from above, and a feeling that shocked the soul came to their faces. Looking at the surprised Miss Storm, a proud smile appeared on the corner of Doom's mouth. The appearance of his old classmate Reed made him feel a hint of crisis. Maybe he should capture this charming person as soon as possible and put an end to it. Any surprises happen? Susan, every man dreams of meeting a beloved woman and dedicating everything to her. To me, this is more than just a metaphor. In the quiet space without interruption and the deliberately romantic atmosphere, Doom is determined to work hard to overcome the opponent's defenses and win the heart of the beauty. "We have been dating for 2 years. Susan, who seemed to be aware of her current boyfriend's thoughts, chuckled and interrupted Doom's heartfelt confession. "Victor, we have been very happy together in the past 2 years. The company is booming and has bright prospects. You have made extraordinary achievements." For Miss Storm, who comes from a wealthy family, Vidoc Doom is not the best choice in her mind. Their interaction can be seen more as an exchange of family interests, just like Doom pursued her in the first place because of his family background. The reason why Susan agreed to become his girlfriend was nothing more than a careful arrangement by her elders. Susan, who seems to be well behaved, has a rebellious factor in her heart that longs for freedom and adventure, so she hates Reed's dullness and lack of romance, but she cannot accept Doom's domineering and arrogant desire to control everything. Especially the fanatical pursuit of money and status. I suddenly realized that all the achievements in the world would be meaningless if there was no one to share them with. I have never been afraid of making big decisions in my life, and now is the time for me to take the most important step in my life. Doom, who was intoxicated in his own world, did not notice that Susan's face gradually became unnatural, and the originally gentle smile seemed a bit forced. Doom released his palm. A small jewelry box lay quietly in his hand. After opening it, he raised it in front of his beloved girlfriend. A carefully selected diamond ring was shining brightly. It was a huge and beautiful sapphire, like a dazzling star in the sky that had been plucked off, carefully carved, and matched with master-level craftsmanship, giving it a dreamlike brilliance. Doom was very confident. He thought that no woman would be willing to look away when she saw it, and I believe Susan would be no exception. I want to say 4 words to you that will change our lives forever. The clouds are speeding up. A sudden voice interrupted. Holding up the diamond ring, the affectionate Doom looked angrily at the person who came, and found that it was Sean from Umbrella Laboratory. The person was not a little person with no foundation like Reed. He had to suppress the anger in his heart and asked, "Condition. The cloud is accelerating. We will collide head-on in a few minutes." Reed said the mission must be aborted. The violent ray flow is fatal. Sean put his hands on the railing and smiled and cast a grateful look. Miss Storm. If it weren't for Sean's sudden appearance, which broke the seemingly romantic but actually awkward atmosphere, Susan really didn't know how to reject Doom, who looked so sincere. On the one hand, she didn't want to hurt her current boyfriend, and on the other hand, she didn't want to accept him, of love. Isn't there still 7 hours? Doom asked angrily. Sean shrugged, indicating that he didn't know. A few minutes ago, Reed discovered that he had made a calculation error. There was only less than 10 minutes left before the cosmic energy storm struck. Thinking of Ben, who was still outside the space station, he immediately wanted Doom to stop the mission. Let Reed calm down. We can't give up completely just because of a small situation. Then the previous investment will be completely wasted. Doom said coldly. He couldn't let a small mistake ruin everything. If this experiment failed, all the funds and investment would be wasted. At that time, Doom would have to bear the heavy consequences alone, and he might even lose his money. The wealth and status you currently have. He came to the New World from a small country in war-torn Eastern Europe, how much hard work he put in, and became a high-class person in people's eyes. Could it be that because of a miscalculation, he had to go back to the poor days of having nothing? This is absolutely impossible. Doom ignored the pleading look from Susan next to him and said coldly, "Close the protective shield. You are committing murder, Victor." Sean's eyes flickered and he rejected the proposal. "We can't do this." Susan also nodded in agreement. If the protective shield blocking the energy storm was closed at this time, Ben, who was still outside, would have no chance of surviving. To achieve great things, someone always needs to sacrifice. Doom doesn't care about the love between his children. He is an egoist himself, and his love for Susan is not pure. It is mixed with many factors of interest. If this beautiful and lovely child was not born into Fame Storm family, maybe he wouldn't pursue it so exhaustively. Seeing Susan turning around and running out of the main control center with a disappointed expression, and Sean also walking out of the only safe cabin, Doom couldn't help but have cold eyes. He walked to the console expressionlessly, stretched out his hand and clicked a few press the virtual button on the lower display screen, and the sturdy and reliable protective cover slowly closes. Outside this, there is his once beloved girlfriend, his college classmates who are competitors and love rivals, and the geniuses who were originally collaborating. And inside the protective shields that fell layer by layer, there was only Victor Doom. "Johnny." Reed ran over anxiously and shouted hurriedly, "Open the outer door of the pressure isolation cabin quickly and take the book back." In the vast dark space, a huge orange-red cloud struck at an alarming speed, like a raging and majestic torrent, emitting extremely terrifying energy fluctuations. Ben was like a whale in the deep sea. He didn't care about the plant seedlings that hadn't been placed yet. He jumped up and paddled desperately in the vacuum of space, rushing towards the open outer hatch. He seemed to be racing against death. The only hope is the open hatch. Countless cosmic rays converge into a rolling torrent, like a huge fire cloud, illuminating this dark space. The scorching and violent terrifying energy contains the terrifying aura of molten gold and iron, burning everything. Reed and Johnny held their breaths and stood nervously by the outer hatch, watching Ben move his hands continuously, trying to grab the last bit of life. Susan, who arrived, subconsciously grabbed Sean and bit her lip, afraid of seeing something unfortunate happen. Among all the people, the only one who remained calm was Sean, who was staring at the menacing energy storm. There was a trace of intoxication in his eyes. Those violent torrents that were as brilliant as fire were, if you look carefully, endless cosmic rays. High-energy particles invisible to the naked eye are constantly colliding violently, bursting out with violent energy reactions. It was as if he could feel every cell in his body making a strong cry, thirsting for more energy to fill the emptiness in his body, hoping to open the door to another unknown world. Ben, faster, Reed kept mumbling to himself. He, who had always been extremely confident in his IQ, was filled with regret and annoyance for the first time. His calculation error caused everyone to be unprepared for the cosmic energy storm. If he had been more serious at that time and repeatedly tested the calculation model, how could he have put his friends in danger? If anything happens to Ben, Reed may live in endless pain and guilt for the rest of his life, and will never be able to be redeemed. Huge clouds like flaming clouds surged in at an astonishing speed, like raging waves on the sea. Endless cosmic rays collided and exploded, forming an extremely violent torrent of energy. Before it was completely close to the source, a huge impact pushed his body forward, as if he was thrown away by a violent wave of air. Ben, wearing a spacesuit, rushed into the outer hatch like a hit baseball, hit the solid wall hard, and then passed out very simply. Johnny, hurry up and close the hatch entrance. Reed breathed a sigh of relief. The huge cloud moved towards the space station, and waves of energy rays hit the solid shell. The chaotic and violent high-energy particles triggered strong electromagnetic radiation. Doom, who was in the protective shield, felt a violent shaking. Various electronic instruments burst out with crackling sparks. The space station shook violently as if it was hit by space junk. The outer hatch was successfully closed, but before everyone's tense nerves could relax, a bright light burst through the outer hatch that blocked the energy rays, like a flood bursting through a bank. A ferocious energy storm hit the space station. A huge amount of rays formed a torrent and rumbled through everyone's bodies. It was as if they were hit head-on by a ferocious giant wave. The violent and surging high-energy particles tore apart human flesh and blood. The first person to bear the brunt was Reed, who was leaning against the entrance of the hatch. He was continuously squeezed and deformed by the majestic force, and his body was pulled like a ball of rubber. Then Johnny closed the hatch, and the scorching air flow directly ignited. His body was broken into pieces, and blazing flames burst out, and Susan's soft and delicate body was shattered by waves of energy storms, and her whole body became vaguely transparent. The raging and violent energy storm transformed the genetic structure of their bodies in such a crude way. The three of them could not bear the ferocious impact and passed out as quickly as Ben. Sean walked towards the hatch step by step. The surging energy storm still couldn't stop his steps. After pressing a few times, the closed hatch opened again. Violent and chaotic high-energy particles occurred in a space that could not be observed by the naked eye. Violent collision, bursts of explosive ray streams, impacting this powerful body without any protection measures. Sean clenched his fists and stood at the entrance of the hatch, like a hard rock standing in the heart of the river, refusing to retreat even if the waves surged. His body was like a black hole, wildly devouring various forms of energy rays, and his whole body seemed to be burning with intense fire. The clothes on his body were destroyed and peeled off, revealing an almost perfect strong body. The naked body withstood the violent impact of the ferocious energy, like a rough embryo that had been struck thousands of times with a giant hammer. The disintegrated flesh and blood healed extremely quickly under the repair of life energy. The cycle repeated again and again, making the tense muscles become denser and denser, like an indestructible steel body. The speed of absorption became faster and faster. Sean gritted his teeth. The painful feeling kept stimulating his nerves. He tried his best to stay conscious, even though the severe pain was so clear. Piles of dark clouds, like blue flames, burn on the bottomless sea. The sea catches the arrows of lightning and extinguishes them in its own abyss. The shadows of these lightnings are like fiery snakes in the sea. It swam in a meandering way and disappeared in a blink of an eye. He recited poetry softly, and his calm mind supported his strong will. A huge torrent of fiery clouds, carrying a huge amount of high-energy particles, roared in like a sea tide. The storm is coming. Sean opened his eyes, his deep eyes reflecting the fierce light of fire. Let the storm come more violently. In the body that underwent drastic changes, a vacuum door that shouldn't exist quietly opened a gap. Sean's thoughts slightly penetrated, and a huge explosion that was difficult to describe in words was like millions of stars shattering and bursting out at the same time. Emitting endless light of energy, just feeling a trace of breath is enough to scare people. Boom! In less than 1,000th of a second, Sean's thoughts were completely destroyed, and violent rays rolled like a torrent, pouring into the non-existent vacuum door, as if there were the portal connected to another dimension effortlessly absorbed the huge energy, and the tiny gap seemed to be opened a little more. Slightly clenching his fists, extremely powerful power surged crazily. Sean could feel that the inside of his brand new body seemed to contain endless light and heat, like a small sun condensed, and surging vitality filled every body. Between cells and breaths, terrifying airflow surges, creating a rumbling sound. Gradually adapting to the huge changes in his body, the mighty energy calmed down. Sean slowly converged the power in his body. The huge and blazing energy cloud gradually subsided like a tide. The space station was extremely quiet. Everyone was unconscious and had no idea about himself. I don't know what has changed. Sean, wearing clothes, sent a distress signal to the Ground Aerospace Agency. He didn't know whether the complicated entanglement between the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom would continue. Anyway, it had nothing to do with him. Looking at the boundless vast universe, Sean stood quietly. He looked forward to the day when he would lead mankind towards the sea of stars. He would no longer limit himself to a small planet, but swim upstream to the endless sea of stars. The breeze blew the gauze curtains, and the bright morning light shone in from the outside. The fine rays of light fell on the white sheets. Susan, who was peacefully asleep, smelled the fragrant fragrance of flowers. She opened her hazy eyes. What comes into view is a white ceiling, surrounded by various medical instruments for measuring vital signs. Various flowers were placed on the bedside, and the whole room was filled with a fragrant atmosphere. Susan turned her face slightly and found an unexpected man sitting next to her, looking at her quietly. Facing the pair of deep eyes like ancient wells, with blonde hair and snow-skinned Miss Storm, who looked like the sleeping beauty in the fairy tale, she subconsciously avoided it, and her calm inner lake wavered with tiny ripples. This is Victor's medical clinic. We have returned to Earth. As if he saw Susan's doubts, Sean replied with a smile. Everyone is fine. Victor is busy handling the company's affairs. He sent these flowers. Reed and the others should be awake at this time. The doctor said your pulse is stable and strong, and there is no radiation reaction in the blood test. You probably only need to rest for a while. Sean explained calmly, and his gentle voice seemed to give people strong confidence. Susan's original worries and doubts gradually disappeared, and she asked softly, "What about you? I remember that the energy storm seemed to have affected you too." Everything was normal. I was far away and didn't faint like you, so I sent a distress signal to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. It took 6 hours to wait for their rescue. After docking with the space station, we successfully landed back Earth. Sean recounted this thrilling experience. Accidents are most likely to occur in space. The space station was hit by an energy storm and almost all electronic equipment failed. Fortunately, it was still able to send out a distress signal. Otherwise, it would have to wait for NASA, called in the hope that someone would notice their anomaly. Thinking about the terrible consequences of being trapped in the dark and endless space, with no way to go to the sky or the Earth, Susan couldn't help but feel a little lucky. In the end, everyone was safe and sound and successfully returned to Earth. She couldn't help but secretly make up her mind that there would never be another time in the future. Traveling in outer space was really scary. Sean's eyes stayed on Susan. In his spiritual world, the other person's body was emitting a weak energy response, similar to optical camouflage. If it was truly displayed, it could completely integrate with the surrounding environment, and even vibrating the air, condensing an invisible force field. Susan coughed a few times. She was made uncomfortable by Sean's unabashed gaze, as if her whole body had been seen through by him, and she felt an inexplicable sense of shame. "Sorry, I was a little distracted." The young man apologized softly. He suddenly thought that in this failed space experiment, the biggest victim would be the future Dr. Doom. A huge investment of nearly $1 billion was wiped out. NASA had to pay high compensation, and the news media also argued after Sean reported the accident, the share price of Doom Group plummeted. Everyone in the industry knew that Victor Doom, a once successful man, had fallen from the clouds and became worthless. And Reed, who caused all this, eventually became a hero praised by everyone. Not only did he win the beauty back, he also defeated his love rival in one fell swoop. If Sean hadn't known Mr. Fantastic's kind-hearted nature, he would have almost thought this was a well-planned conspiracy. After a few seconds of silence for Doom, Sean's attention turned to the TV. On the screen, Tony Stark's friend Colonel Rhodes was speaking to reporters. Quote, "Regarding the explosion that occurred in Stark Industrial Park last night, the official statement has been sent to everyone. Witnesses claimed that there were huge robots fighting each other. It was just a malfunction that occurred during testing. In the industrial park, the arc shock reactor was also damaged as a result." Seeing Colonel Rhodes' reasonable explanation, Sean had a smile on his face. Susan, who was lying on the bed, stared at the young face and asked softly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." The young man shook his head. "I'm just feeling the arrival of a new era. Stark Industries." Listening to the official explanation issued by Colonel Rhodes standing in front of the stage, Tony Stark read this morning's newspaper with gusto, while female secretary Pepper carefully applied simple makeup on him to cover up the stain on his face. "Small scars. Iron Man, this name is really catchy, I like it very much." Tony experienced the thrilling and fierce battle last night, and he was still in the mood to joke, but strictly speaking, the description is not accurate enough. In fact, Mark's armor is made of gold and titanium made of alloy. "Mr. Stark, this is what you want to tell reporters." A black-clothed agent from a special agency named Coulson came over. Tony, who has always hated State Department staff, rarely showed a good attitude. If the other party hadn't provided help and delayed the crazed Obadiah, perhaps Pepper would have died tragically under the powerful firepower of the steel machine. "You were on the private yacht yesterday. We prepared customs documents saying that you were on vacation in Hawaii all night yesterday. We also obtained the testimony of 50 witnesses for you. You only need to read it word for word." As if he was worried about the Playboy's willfulness, Coulson kept talking. "As for Mr. Obadiah Stine, we have also prepared our words. He was also on vacation at the time, but he was unlucky and the passenger plane he was traveling on encountered an accident." "Accident? Well, that's really professional." Tony praised him without saltiness. "He hates doing things according to other people's instructions. That would be very uncomfortable. Even if the whole world knows that he is Iron Man, what will happen? These special institutions hidden in the dark always like to hide everything from the people, as if such things are easy to do." "Nothing happened. This is not the first time I have dealt with this kind of thing, Mr. Stark." Coulson maintained a gentle smile. "As long as you read according to the script, this matter will calm down soon." "Okay, by the way, what's your name?" "National Strategic Security Bureau." Tony suddenly remembered. He didn't know the departments these black agents belonged to, and they didn't look like agents from the FBI or CIA. "Shield." Coulson turned to leave. "We changed the name to something easier to remember." He was originally going to the Arctic Glacier to salvage a downed plane, but was temporarily delayed due to an unexpected incident at Stark Industries. Director Nick Fury valued this cynical playboy very much, and even listed as an important protected figure. Quote, "Now, Mr. Stark will make a statement and will not answer any questions." "Thank you." After the lengthy and boring official speech, the reporters saw Tony Stark, the protagonist of this incident, walking onto the stage. The reporters seemed to be on stimulants and kept clicking the flashlights. They expected the other party to have another powerful one. Big news, last time it was said that Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing plant was going to be closed, the newspaper was sold out the next morning. Ah, I haven't seen you all for a long time. I think I'd better read from the script this time. Stark's unique cold humor won a burst of laughter. Some people suspect that I was involved in the incident on the highway and during the fierce fight in the industrial park. Newspapers even promoted me as a superhero and gave me the name, Iron Man. Tony looked down at the manuscript and continued, obviously, I am not made to be a hero. I have so many personality flaws and have caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people. So the truth is, he raised the manuscript in his hand and looked at the reporters and cameras in the audience. He took a deep breath and said solemnly, I am Iron Man. Compared to being a big arms dealer, a playboy, and a scientific genius, Tony currently prefers his new identity of a superhero. The eager eyes of those reporters, as well as the constant flashing lights, and the feeling of being focused by everyone's attention, make him extremely enjoyable. The world needs heroes. He looked at the reporters gathered around him and thought to himself, Iron Man can protect the world. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.